Chapter 3043. One still, one moving awoe. The three doomsday devourers let out shrill cries as the power of the array around them was forcibly suppressed by the bone-corroding soul-refining chains. Nietion frowned. He did not dare to be careless and tighten the bone-corroding soul-refining chains. The power of the doomsday devourers was very strong. He could feel a strong resistance. "Fat!" Nietion shouted. He did not know why the fat cat did not let him kill the doomsday devourers directly. Nietion sensed carefully. Are these doomsday devourers the same as the Three Suns tree? The fat cat said solemnly, its eyes burning with a burning light. Same. Nietion was stunned. How could the Three Suns tree be the same as the doomsday devourers? However, he still used his divine sense to sense it and immediately felt a familiar aura. Array patterns. The aura of array patterns. Nietion's eyes suddenly narrowed in horror. He had actually sensed the aura of an array pattern on the doomsday devourer's body. This array pattern aura was very similar to the array pattern aura he had sensed on the Three Sun tree. However, there was an additional ruthless aura, and it was clearly stronger. Fat, these doomsday devourers are the same as the Three Suns tree. They're also array patterns. Nietion reacted in the next moment. His eyes trembled as he exclaimed. He immediately understood. The doomsday devourers were actually array patterns. No wonder the fat cat did not let him kill these doomsday devourers directly. Nietion, find where the array patterns in these little bastards converge, the fat cat said solemnly, its eyes burning with passion. Okay. Nietion nodded heavily. He opened his demon eye and soon found that the array patterns converged at the center of the doomsday devourers' foreheads. It's here. The corners of Nietion's mouth twitched. With a thought, the bone-corroding soul-refining chains immediately moved and directly blasted open the center of the doomsday devourers' foreheads. Stepping forward, Yang Kai placed the Saint Chi blood jade near the bloody hole in the doomsday devourer's forehead. Immediately, the power of the spirit array gushed out and was absorbed by the blood jade. Suddenly, the doomsday devourer lost its runes, and its aura weakened significantly. Nietion smiled faintly. With a thought, the bone-corroding soul-shackling chain took out the doomsday devourer's beast core. He placed the beast core into the Heaven's Choice token, but his expression immediately stiffened as he exclaimed in astonishment, "Human-grade devourer!" Now that the beast core had entered the Heaven's Choice token, his points had increased by 1 point. Didn't that mean that the doomsday devourer he had just killed was a human-grade devourer? Nietion couldn't help but frown at this discovery, and his expression froze. The doomsday devourer in front of him had terrifying combat strength. It was much stronger than ordinary low-level fall saints. Nietion originally thought that it was an Earth-class devourer, but he did not expect it to be a human-class devourer. If a human-class devourer was already this powerful, then how powerful would an Earth-class devourer and a Heaven-class devourer be? Nietion finally understood why killing a Heaven-class devourer would give him 10 points. He guessed that a Heaven-class devourer's combat strength was definitely close to a high-level false saint, or even a peak false saint. This doomsday hunt was not for the Heavens chosen to hunt the doomsday devourers, but for the doomsday devourers to hunt the Heavens chosen. Although these Heavens chosen were all martial arts geniuses in the myriad regions, they were all very young after all. Most of them were below the false saint level. After the doomsday hunt ended, it would be very good if 1/10 of the Heavens chosen were left. This doomsday hunt was more dangerous than Nietion had imagined. Then, Nietion used the same method to kill the other 2 doomsday devourers. After the Saint Origin blood jade absorbed the runes in the bodies of the 3 doomsday devourers, the aura of the heaven and earth saint runes became much stronger. Nietion looked at the thin golden Tao pattern in the Saint Origin blood jade and slowly probed it with his divine sense. His face was filled with shock. Although the golden Tao pattern looked very small, after probing it with his divine sense, the aura inside was very vast, as if it contained a vast world. The heaven and earth saint runes contain 3,000 great Taos. The aura you sense is only the most superficial power of the heaven and earth saint runes. The fat cat smiled faintly and said, "It's definitely not an easy task to completely unseal the heaven and earth saint runes." Tian retracted his divine sense, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble as he asked, "Fat, didn't you just say that you have a way to unseal the heaven and earth saint runes? Haven't you already guessed my method?" The fat cat smiled and said indifferently, "Are you really going to absorb the power of those three suns?" Tian's eyes trembled as he looked at the three suns in the sky again. "Tian, do you know what the essence of the sun is?" The fat cat smiled again and asked, "I don't know." Tian shook his head with a puzzled expression. "The essence of the sun is the star." The fat cat nodded and said, "The sun contains an extremely violent flame power, which is why this world is so hot. Can the flame power of the three suns unlock the heaven and earth saint runes?" Tian didn't quite understand the fat cat's words, so he asked directly, "It's enough." The fat cat nodded and said, "The power of the three suns is enough to unlock 3 heaven and earth saint runes." 3. Tian's eyes trembled as he exclaimed excitedly. 1 heaven and earth saint rune meant 1 saint. 3 heaven and earth saint runes meant 3 saints. How could he not be excited? After a while, Tian became cold and asked with a burning gaze, "Fat, how can we absorb the power of the 3 suns? This world called Doomsday Forest is a large formation. If I'm not wrong, the 3 suns are the source of the formation's power. If we want to absorb the power of the entire formation, we have to find the core of the formation." The fat cat frowned and said solemnly, "Core of the formation." When Tian heard this, his eyes couldn't help but burn with a burning light. The Doomsday Formation in front of us is very cleverly designed. There are 2 kinds of Tao patterns in the formation. One is static, which is the 3-sun tree, and the other is moving, which is the Doomsday Devourer. The fat cat continued, "I guess that the core of the formation is most likely in the body of a Doomsday Devourer. And this Doomsday Devourer must be very strong, at least at the peak of the False Saint realm, or even at the Saint realm." This, when Tian heard the fat cat's words, his face couldn't help but stiffen, and he couldn't speak for a long time. The Doomsday Formation's formation was indeed very clever. It was the 3-sun tree and the Doomsday Devourer. Every 3-sun tree and every Doomsday Devourer was a formation pattern. A human-level Devourer was already so powerful. The strength of the Doomsday Devourer at the core of the formation was simply unimaginable. "Tian, this matter can't be forced. There's no need to be in a hurry to unseal the heaven and earth saint runes," the fat cat said solemnly. Its mood was obviously much gloomier. "How do we know if we don't try?" Tian didn't give up. He laughed and said, "Anyway, we have a month's time. There's no rush. Let's try and see if we can find the core of the formation." When the fat cat heard Tian's words, it couldn't help but stare and shake its head. Chapter 3044. A Fool's Dream. 3 days later, in the Doomsday Forest, a figure shuttled through the forest at a fast speed. It was none other than Tian. At this moment, Tian's figure moved nimbly and steadily landed on a huge 3-suns tree. Standing on a tree, Tian glanced around and muttered with a frown, "This doomsday jungle is much larger than I thought. It seems it's going to be hard to find the spell formation's eye." For the past 3 days, he had been running through the forest in an attempt to find the Doomsday Formation's formation core. To his disappointment, the Doomsday Forest was much bigger than he had imagined. Along the way, he did not even see a single Doomsday Devourer, let alone the formation core. "We can't keep searching like this." Tian narrowed his eyes and said, "Fat, Ghost Emperor, do you have any idea how to find the formation core? It's difficult." Before Fat Cat could speak, the Ghost Emperor let out a long sigh and said with a wry smile, "This is the first time I've seen such a huge formation. Even if I recover to my peak condition, it will take at least a few hundred years or even 1,000 years to crack the Doomsday Formation structure. There's less than a month left. It's impossible to find the formation core by cracking the formation. Nietion's expression stiffened when he heard the Ghost Emperor's words. The world before him was indeed much bigger than the Ghost Emperor's tomb that he had entered before. As for the Ghost Emperor's tomb, the Ghost Emperor had spent a lot of time and sacrificed his martial body to build it. With such a comparison, one could imagine how terrifying this doomsday formation was. Perhaps Fat Cat knew more than the Ghost Emperor, but in terms of formation skills, he was definitely not as good as the Ghost Emperor. If even the Ghost Emperor could not crack the formation, it was even more impossible for Fat Cat. Nietion, there are some things that you can't do just because you want to. Instead of aimlessly looking for the array core here, you might as well find a way to find your friends. It's very dangerous here. Your friend isn't safe, Fat Cat said solemnly. Nietion smiled bitterly and said, "It seems that unsealing the saint runes of heaven and earth is impossible." His ambition was great, but no matter how great his ambition was, without the corresponding strength to support it, it could only be a fool's dream. Not even the Ghost Emperor and Fat Cat could do anything about the doomsday formation before them. If Nietion were to insist, he would be a little stupid. However, it would be very difficult for him to find the others. The entire doomsday jungle was too big. Trying to find a person was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Run! Just as Nietion was at his wit's end, a panicked cry came from afar. He furrowed his brows and flew toward the source of the voice. Far in the distance, the three black-clad cultivators fled frantically as if they were avoiding something. However, at this moment, a fireball suddenly appeared in the sky. It was as fast as lightning, and it directly attacked the three of them. "It's over." The three felt an oppressive force appear behind them, and their faces turned as pale as paper. Swoosh! In the next moment, a flaming blade swept over. The body of the last cultivator trembled as the flaming blade sliced him apart. Immediately, a 10-meter-long figure appeared and landed on the ground. It opened its mouth and swallowed the corpse on the ground. This figure was a doomsday devourer. However, its body was over a dozen meters long. Furthermore, the aura it emitted was extremely powerful. Its entire body was burning with violent flames, as if it wanted to devour everything. Roar! After swallowing the corpse on the ground, the doomsday devourer roared and stared at the two fleeing figures with its blood-red eyes. It pounced at them like a sharp arrow. Boom! In the next moment, the two fleeing figures felt a terrifying oppressive force and could not help but turn around. When they saw the doomsday devourer pouncing at them, their faces turned ashen and they were in complete despair. The two of them, one male and one female, only had the strength of a stage 9 demi-saint. They could not resist the doomsday devourer at all. Boom! Just when the two of them had completely given up resisting and were on the brink of death, a sword shadow descended from the void and landed heavily on the doomsday devourer like a mountain. Bang! With a muffled sound, the violent sword will exploded. The terrifying sword wave forcibly stopped the doomsday devourer and forced it to retreat hundreds of meters. The two heavens chosen were stunned and immediately turned around to see a figure standing in the air. His silver hair was flying and his sword was surging. "It's you." The two heavens chosen immediately recognized that the person who saved them was none other than Nietion. "Both of you retreat. Leave this doomsday devourer to me." Nietion's eyes darkened, and he said cold, "Okay." The two nodded and quickly retreated. Roar! At that moment, the doomsday devourer seemed to have been angered by Nietion's sword. It roared violently and stomped on the ground, stirring up a dust wave that was dozens of meters high. Then, its huge body was like a small hill as it charged towards Nietion. Nietion's eyes narrowed and the sword aura around his body suddenly surged as he slashed down with a starry heavenly slash. The doomsday devourer's aura was comparable to a stage 5 demi-saint powerhouse. Its body was extremely tough. Nietion did not dare to be careless and attacked with all his might. Boom! Boom! In the next instant, the sword shadow struck the Doomsday Devourer's body and suddenly paused before shattering in the air. Whoosh! At the same time, the Doomsday Devourer's sharp claws slashed down. A flaming blade appeared and tore through the void towards Nietion. Nietion frowned and immediately retreated. However, he was still a step too late and was slashed by the flaming blade. A wound appeared on his left arm and blood gushed out. When the two Heavens Chosen saw this, their faces stiffened and they gasped. It seemed that even someone as powerful as Nietion could not stop this Doomsday Devourer. Let's go. At this moment, the green-robed man reacted and prepared to leave. Wait. However, the green-robed woman's eyes trembled and she did not want to leave immediately. Junior sister, this kid can't possibly be a match for the Doomsday Devourer. Are we going to stay here and die with him? The green-robed man's eyes darkened and he said directly, not avoiding Nietion. Senior brother, I believe that with Lord Nietion's strength, he will definitely be able to kill this Doomsday Devourer, the green-robed woman said loudly, as though she was afraid that Nietion could not hear her. The test on the Heaven's Chosen platform had made everyone know about Nietion. Hence, it was not surprising that this pair of brother and sister knew of Nietion's name. Junior sister. The green-robed man's face darkened and he wanted to say something. However, the green-robed woman glared at him and he swallowed his words. The green-robed woman looked at Nietion and her eyes flickered with a trace of coldness. Chapter 3045. Won't be lenient. The green-robed man could guess the green-robed woman's thoughts and couldn't help but draw in a breath of cold air. He didn't expect that at this time, the green-robed woman still dared to have the intention to kill Nietion. However, Nietion was the biggest prey in this doomsday hunt. It wasn't strange for the green-robed woman to want to kill him. Killing Nietion would give the Heavens Chosen 100 points, which was equivalent to 10 heaven-ranked devourers. The green-robed woman calmed down and stared coldly at Nietion, saying in her heart, Nietion, you better fight with this Doomsday Devourer until both sides suffer. Nietion's silhouette froze in midair. Suddenly, he felt a surge of killing intent behind him, causing his gaze to tighten. His devil's eye and God's punishment had both awakened. His perception of killing intent had already reached a fine level. Even though the green-robed woman was restraining her killing intent, Nietion could still sense it. What a pair of martial siblings. I saved you out of kindness, yet you want to kill me. Nietion sneered in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He had to deal with this Doomsday Devourer first, then deal with this pair of martial siblings. Moreover, he still had a lot of doubts in his heart regarding this pair of martial siblings. Roar! At this moment, the Doomsday Devourer roared in anger and rushed over again. Two sharp claws slashed through the air, and two flaming blades slashed out, aiming for Nietion. Beast just in time. The corners of Nietion's mouth twitched, after which the sword intent from his body soared into the sky. His entire person stood in the air like a giant sword. 9 limits of starry sky, heaven slash. In the next instant, he slashed out with his sword. A huge sword shadow appeared, blasting towards the Doomsday Devourer. At the same time, Nietion's silhouette actually moved. Astral soul wings appeared behind his back, and with a flap of his wings, he didn't retreat but advanced instead. Like a rainbow, he rushed towards the Doomsday Devourer. Is he crazy? Seeing this, the azure-robed man's heart shook, and he let out a startled cry. He hadn't expected Nietion to be so ferocious as to charge straight at him. Boom! In the next instant, a sword shadow descended from the void and heavily bombarded the Doomsday Devourer's body. However, it was blocked by the power of the formation on its body. Pooh! Puffed! Nietion's figure rushed over at this moment. 2 flaming blades left 2 bloody wounds on his body. He didn't care at all. He took a step forward and landed on the Doomsday Devourer's head. The azure-robed man and the green-robed woman were completely dumbfounded when they saw this. They couldn't imagine that Nietion was actually so ferocious. Die, you beast! Hovering over the Doomsday Devourer's head, Nietion let out a bellow as he summoned all of his bone-eroding soul shackling chains and smashed them down with great force, piercing through the Doomsday Devourer's protective spell formation and leaving a bloody hole in its forehead. Oh, the sudden and intense pain caused the Doomsday Devourer to howl miserably. Nietion smiled and took out the Saint Essence Blood Jade, directly absorbing the formation runes on the Doomsday Devourer's forehead, following which the Doomsday Devourer's aura suddenly weakened. Die! Nietion laughed. The bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains suddenly exerted force and forcefully dug out the Doomsday Devourer's beast core. The Doomsday Devourer's body stiffened and directly fell to the ground dead. Nietion smiled faintly and placed the beast core into the Heaven's Choice token. His points increased by 5 points. 5 points meant that the Doomsday Devourer he killed was Earthgrade, just as he expected. An Earthgrade Devourer's combat power was around a rank 5 pseudo-saint. It seemed that a Skygrade Devourer's combat power should be close to the peak of pseudo-saint. Then, Nietion's figure moved and landed in front of the 2 Heaven's Chosen Ones, who were still in a daze. Nietion, you... After a long time, the green-robed man finally reacted. His eyes trembled, and he immediately changed his words. Lord Nietion, you're really amazing. He had originally thought that Nietion's strength was not enough to kill an Earthgrade Devourer. Who knew that Nietion's kill, just now, was as smooth as flowing water, without the slightest bit of sloppiness. It could be said to be perfect. He simply could not imagine that a rank 5 demi-saint could kill an Earthgrade Devourer so easily. I told you, Lord Nietion would definitely be able to kill the Doomsday Devourer. At that moment, the green-robed woman reacted and exclaimed in surprise. She looked at Nietion with a complicated expression. She had just imagined that Nietion and the Doomsday Devourer would fight each other to the death, and then she would act and kill Nietion. She did not expect that Nietion was so powerful that he could kill the Doomsday Devourer directly. Is that so? Nietion looked at the green-garbed woman, smiled, and said, My performance just now disappointed you, didn't it? No. Lord Nietion's bravery is unparalleled. How could this little girl dare to be disappointed? The green-robed woman quickly said with a guilty conscience. Who are you people? The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched, but he did not say anything else and asked instead. Lord Nietion, my name is Tenghua, and this is my senior brother, Jiangyan. We are Heaven's Chosen Ones from the 4 strange territories. Tenghua's expression was much better as he nodded. 4 strange territories. Nietion pondered for a moment, his eyes flashing as he asked, What does the person who just died have to do with you? The 4 strange territories was not unfamiliar to Nietion. It was one of the 3 sacred territories of the myriad territories. Lord Nietion, the Heaven's Chosen One who just died, was our junior brother. Tenghua's beautiful eyes flickered as he hesitated for a moment before saying, Lord Nietion, there were originally 5 of us. 2 others were also killed by this Doomsday Devourer. At this moment, Jiang En spoke with an ugly expression. 5 people. Nietion frowned and asked solemnly, How did the 5 of you gather together? Jiang En and Tenghua's identity as senior brother and junior sister made him feel very strange just now. All the cultivators that entered the Doomsday Forest were scattered, but this pair of senior brothers were able to meet together. It was too much of a coincidence, and Jiang En said that the 5 of them were together. This was even more strange. If it was only Jiang En and Tenghua, it could be said to be a coincidence. But with 5 people gathered together, it was definitely not a coincidence. When Tenghua and Jiang En heard Nietion's question, their eyes trembled and their expression stiffened. Only then did they understand that Nietion had noticed this. Lord Nietion, the 5 of us gathered together is really a coincidence. After a moment, Jiang En spoke stiffly. Coincidence? Nietion's expression darkened and instantly turned cold. Do you think I will believe your words? If you don't say it, then you're forcing me to kill you. In any case, you wanted to kill me just now. I have never been lenient to people who bite the hand that feeds them. This... Jiang En's expression stiffened and became extremely ugly. Tenghua's beautiful eyes trembled and her petite face turned pale. So it turned out that Niet Tian had noticed everything just now. He just didn't say it. I'll ask again. How did you guys gather together? Niet Tian's gaze turned cold and murderous. Chapter 3046. For Wonder Divine Soul Stone. If you had cooperated earlier, I wouldn't have had to expose you. Niet Tian smiled faintly, looked at Jiang En, and said, Speak. Wait. Jiang En was just about to speak, but was interrupted by Tang Hua. The latter looked at Niet Tian and said, We can tell you the truth, but you have to promise to protect our safety in the upcoming doomsday hunt. Are you negotiating with me? Niet Tian frowned, then said with a smile, Do you think you have the qualifications to negotiate with me in your current situation? You. Tang Hua was stunned. She didn't expect Niet Tian to be so domineering and was speechless. Speak. Niet Tianling laughed with a gloomy face. If Tang Hua didn't want to kill him before, he could consider protecting this pair of brother and sister. But now, this pair of brother and sister should pray for their own good fortune. Lord Niet Tian, we were able to find our companions so quickly because of this. Jiang En said with a depressed face, took out a spherical jade stone, and said. Niet Tian's eyes narrowed. Looking at the spherical jade stone, he actually sensed a lot of soul auras and asked in astonishment, What is this? This is called the Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone, the Saint Stone of our Four Wonder Academy. Jiang En's face was ugly as he said, Teacher brought us to participate in the Heaven's chosen doomsday hunt and hoped that we could look after each other. So he gave us the Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone. What is the use of this jade stone? Niet Tian frowned and asked in a deep voice. The Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone can record a cultivator's soul aura, and it can sense a cultivator's soul within 10,000 miles. Jiang En nodded slightly and said, Before entering the Doomsday Forest, we used the Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone to record the soul aura of all the heavens chosen. After entering the Doomsday Forest, I used the Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone to sense the others, so I quickly met up with junior sister Tang Hua. When Niet Tian heard Jiang En's words, his eyes couldn't help trembling, his eyes blazing. He never thought that such a small piece of jade would actually have such a powerful ability. Not only could it record the aura of a martial artist's divine soul, but his divine sense could also sense it within 10,000 miles. It was no wonder that Jiang En and the others were able to gather together in just 3 short days. Then, Niet Tian calmed himself down and looked at Jiang En with a burning gaze. You just said that this Four Wonders Divine Soul Stone records the soul auras of every heaven's chosen one, right? Yes. Jiang En nodded. The stone not only records the auras of all the heavens chosen, but it also records the soul auras of all the doom messengers, heaven's chosen sovereign and heaven's chosen saint. That's great. Niet Tian's eyes trembled, and he couldn't help but smile. He was just worrying about how to find share in the rest. The Four Oddities Divine Soul Stone was exactly what he needed. Jiang En, do all 5 of you have Four Wonder Divine Soul Stones? Then, the corners of Niet Tian's mouth twitched as he asked indifferently. Of course not. Jiang En quickly shook his head and said, The Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone is the sacred stone of the Four Wonder Academy. There are only 3 pieces in the entire academy. If it wasn't for Teacher personally coming this time, we wouldn't have been able to obtain the Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone. So that's how it is. Niet Tian faintly smiled and extended his hand. I want the Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone. Jiang En and the others were from the Four Wonder Academy, so their status in the Four Wonder Realm was probably the same as the Saint Soul Academy in the Saint Soul Realm. Jiang En's teacher could bring out the Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone from the Four Wonder Academy, so his status there must be very high. However, these are not things that Niet Tian needed to consider. He only knew that the Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone was a good item, so he wanted it. You want it? Jiang En was stunned and his eyes widened as he exclaimed. The Four Wonder Divine Soul Stone is the sacred stone of the Four Wonder Academy. If we lose it, how will junior sister and I explain to Teacher? Then if you too die, do we still need to explain? Niet Tian's eyes darkened as he coldly spoke. This Jiang In and Tung Hua glanced at each other with extremely ugly expressions. They did not doubt that Nie Tian would kill them. Okay, I won't take your 4 Wonder Divine Soul Stone for nothing. I will be responsible for your safety in the Doomsday Forest. Seeing their reaction, Nie Tian let out a laugh and said, "A rock in exchange for your lives. It's a good deal, isn't it?" Jiang In and Tung Hua pulled a long face, but in the end, they nodded and handed the 4 Wonder Divine Soul Stone to Nie Tian. At this time, they had no choice but to hand it over. Fortunately, Nie Tian wasn't a bad person and had agreed to protect them. Nie Tian received the 4 Wonder Divine Soul Stone and carefully sensed it. His face was filled with joy. The 4 Wonder Divine Soul Stone was indeed a good thing. Nie Tian sensed many familiar divine soul auras from it, including his own divine soul aura. At this time, Nie Tian suddenly understood. Looking at Jiang In and Tung Hua, he couldn't help but smile. "I understand. You two are looking for me, right?" "Yes." Jiang In and Tung Hua nodded bitterly. The reason they appeared here was to look for Nie Tian. Among the 5 of them, the strongest 2 were already false saint experts. Therefore, after the 5 of them gathered, the first thing they did was to look for Nie Tian. After all, Nie Tian was the biggest prey in this hunt. But what they did not expect was that before they could find Nie Tian, they would encounter an Earth-Grey Devourer. Fortunately, Nie Tian acted in time. Otherwise, Jiang In and Tung Hua would have died under the claws of the Earth-Grey Devourer. Jiang In and Tung Hua originally thought that since Nie Tian was only a 5th-level demi-saint, it should be easy to kill him. Although they had seen Nie Tian's 9-level Chaos Beast with their own eyes, they knew that the 9-level Chaos Beast was sealed by honorable heavens chosen. Therefore, in their opinion, Nie Tian was no different from an ordinary 5th-level demi-saint. But when they saw Nie Tian in action, only then did they know how terrifying Nie Tian was. Even if they did not encounter an Earth-Grey Devourer, they would not be able to kill Nie Tian. Hee, it seems that being the biggest prey does have its benefits. Nie Tian looked at the 4 Wonder Divine Soul Stone in his hand and could not help but laugh. Then, he began to sense the divine soul auras in the 4 Wonder Divine Soul Stone and quickly confirmed the positions of several familiar people. The 4 Wonder Divine Soul Stone could sense the divine soul auras within 10,000 miles and pinpoint their exact location. However, Nie Tian did not sense the auras of Cher and Rui Qinyu. It seemed that the 2 of them should be 10,000 miles away from him. That was when Nie Tian suddenly sensed the presence of a familiar divine soul aura. It was not far away from him, just a few 100,000 meters away, and was still sprinting towards him at breakneck speed. "It's that little witch," Nie Tian murmured, frowning. The divine soul aura he sensed was none other than the Rakshasa Saintess, Yula. "Lord Nie Tian, it's the Rakshasa Saintess. She seems to be injured." Jiang In pointed at the 4 Wonder Divine Soul Stone and said as if he had sensed something. "Injured?" Nie Tian was stunned. The 4 Wonder Divine Soul Stone could sense the state of a martial artist's martial form? "Yes." Jiang In nodded nervously. "I can sense that the Saintess's divine soul aura is unstable. She should be badly hurt." Nie Tian frowned. Given the Rakshasa Saintess's ability, who could have hurt her so badly that even her divine soul aura was unstable? "Let's go and take a look." Without any hesitation, Nie Tian flew in the direction of Yulua. A moment later, he arrived outside a valley and saw the bodies of more than 10 Doomsday Devourers lying on the ground. All of them were Earth-Grey Devourers. Roar! At that moment, a deep roar came from the valley. A terrifying Devourer aura shot up into the sky and shook the sky. Chapter 3047. Heaven-Grey Devourer looked at the devouring aura soaring into the sky, and his expression changed. This devouring aura was much stronger than the Earth-Grey Devourer he had seen before. Without a doubt, this was a Heaven-Grey Devourer. The Earth-Grey Devourer from before was already equivalent to a rank 5 pseudo-sacred human expert. It was hard to imagine how strong this heaven-grade devourer was. Lord Nyetian this. Jiang In and Tung Hua turned pale when they saw this. They called out to Nyetian, but they were speechless. "Stand back," Nyetian bellowed, and his figure flashed as he flew into the valley. His figure was extremely fast, and with a single step, he arrived at the entrance of the valley. What he saw caused his expression to darken. In the valley, a doomsday devourer stood close to 100 meters tall, and the flames around its body were extremely violent. Tongues of flame shot into the sky like a moving volcano. Nyetian stood 10,000 meters away, and the aura of the doomsday devourer made him feel suffocated. This aura, Nyetian could not help but suck in a breath of cold air, and his eyes trembled. Such a terrifying aura meant that the doomsday devourer before him had battle prowess close to a rank 8, or even a rank 9 pseudo-sacred. But in the next moment, Nyetian saw several bloody wounds over 10 meters long on the back of the huge doomsday devourer. Blood gushed out and dyed its originally black body red. Nyetian. At this moment, a surprised voice rang out. "Your Highness!" Nyetian's gaze trembled as he saw the Rakshasa, Holy Maiden Yuluo, standing on a huge rock in the valley. Her petite body was already covered in blood, and only her eyes were still sharp. It seemed like a bloody battle had broken out between Yuluo and this heaven-grade devourer, and both sides were injured. However, Yuluo's injuries were clearly more severe. Nyetian estimated that the dozen Earth-ranked devourers outside the valley were also killed by Yuluo. After absorbing the heaven's yellow seed, Yuluo's strength reached rank 4 pseudo-sage. Among all the chosen ones, she was definitely in the top 10. However, her strength was definitely not too strong. She was able to kill more than a dozen Earth-grade devourers and severely injure a heaven-grade devourer with her rank 4 pseudo-sage cultivation. One could imagine how terrifying Yuluo's strength was. Right at this moment, Yuluo's gaze suddenly trembled, and she loudly warned Nyetian, "Quickly leave this place. Your Highness the Saintess, am I, Nyetian, so unbearable in your eyes?" Nyetian chuckled. His figure moved, and he appeared in the air above the valley. He naturally knew that Yuluo was worried about his safety, so she asked him to leave. However, this also showed that Yuluo had no confidence in his battle prowess. In truth, Nyetian did not want to face a devourer. However, Yuluo had saved him before. Even if she had ulterior motives, she had still saved him. He could not let Nyetian leave at this time. "Idiot, you're only a rank 5 demisage. Are you trying to get yourself killed?" Yuluo could not help but yell angrily when she saw that Nyetian did not leave. "Your Highness the Saintess, this doomsday devourer is already injured. Just leave it to me." Nyetian laughed. There was no fear on his face, but firm confidence. Yuluo's beautiful eyes trembled. She could feel the confidence in Nyetian's eyes and did not know what to say for a moment. Of course, she knew that if Nyetian left, she would definitely die in the hands of this doomsday devourer. Even she found it strange. Why would she let Nyetian leave? She was only interested in the star origin stones on Nyetian. Why would she care about his life? Roar. Before Yuluo could figure it out, the devourer went berserk. With a furious roar, the terrifying aura of flames around its body surged and spread into the void. Its entire body was like a volcano that was about to erupt. A heaven-grade devourer is really strong. Nyetian could not help but frown when he felt the fiery aura rushing towards him. He did not expect that the devourer could still release such a violent aura despite being so heavily injured. "Nyetian, be careful. Don't get close to this big guy. There's some kind of array around its body that's very frightening." Yuluo looked at Nyetian and reminded him loudly. "I know," Nyetian replied and smiled. "It's precisely because there's a protective array around its body. How can I destroy the array if I don't get close to it?" As soon as he finished, Nyetian's figure moved like a streak of light and directly charged towards the devourer. "Nyetian!" Yuluo could not help but exclaim when she saw this scene. It had never occurred to her that Nyetian would actually rush over. Boom! At this moment, the Devourer's giant claws danced in the air, and a ball of flames appeared in the air and directly bombarded towards Nietion. Ao Jian's forbidden move, blood devours the firmament. Nietion's eyes narrowed, and without any hesitation, he directly slashed out with his sword. Blood chi and sword essence surged out at the same time, and a blood-colored sword shadow suddenly appeared. This time, he directly used a forbidden move, using blood chi to stimulate the sword essence and burst out a stronger power. He was facing the Sky Sword Devourer, so he couldn't afford to be careless. Boom! In the next moment, the blood-colored sword shadow directly collided with the fireball. There was a roar in the air, and suddenly, the sword essence and the power of flames surged in the void. Nietion's figure was like a stream of light, directly passing through the sea of flames. With a single step, he steadily landed on the huge body of the Devourer. He activated the Astral Soul Shield, but he could still feel the blazing aura seeping into his bones, as though it wanted to ignite his entire body. Roar! The Devourer roared, and the flames on its body suddenly became violet. Numerous tongues of flames swallowed and attacked the void. Boom! Nietion suddenly felt a terrifying, blazing energy rushing towards him. The astral soul shield around his body suddenly heated up, and a layer of flames directly covered his body. Nietion, quickly break the formation. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded out, sounding anxious. Okay, Nietion replied, ignoring the intense pain of the flames burning his body. The 9-bone eroding soul shackling chains in his body simultaneously shot out, intertwining together, forming a giant snake-like soul shackling chain. At the same time, a huge amount of fiend god energy surged out from Nietion's body, enveloping the soul shackling chain and smashing towards the formation outside the Devourer's body. The bone-eroding soul shackling chain had a strong destructive effect on the formation, and coupled with the fiend god energy, it was undoubtedly even more powerful. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. Bang! In the next instant, the soul shackling chain descended, and with a loud bang, the formation's power shattered inch by inch. Upon seeing this, Nietion took a step back and rapidly retreated. The flame energy around the Devourer was too strong, and he could not withstand it for long. Yuluo suddenly felt the Devourer's aura weakened by a lot, and her beautiful eyes couldn't help but tremble in shock. She didn't expect Nietion's method to be so strange, directly destroying the formation outside the Devourer's body. Chapter 3048. Unable to sense, Nietion destroyed the Heaven Devourer's formation and retreated 1,000 meters away. Only then did the flames on his body dissipate. Roar! At this moment, the Heaven Devourer roared in rage. A pair of bloodshot eyes stared at Nietion. A violent aura shot up to the sky. Bastard, you dare to be so arrogant without the protection of the formation? Nietion sneered and was about to attack. But at this moment, a figure appeared in midair. It was Yuluo, Myriad Realm Devourer, Hand of Nothingness. Yuluo's figure froze. The corner of her lips twitched. Her jade-like hand descended from the sky. Instantly, an invisible and traceless force appeared, causing the void to groan. And in the next moment, a strange and tragic scene happened. Bang! The Heaven Devourer's giant head swayed for a moment before it was cut off. Fresh blood sprayed into the sky like a torrential rain. This! Nietion was stunned by the scene before him and was momentarily speechless. Yuluo's methods were terrifying. She actually cut off the Heaven Devourer's head. This scene was like an invisible giant hand in the void, pressing down on the Heaven Devourer's head and forcefully twisting it off. Bang! Following which, the Heaven Devourer's body landed on the ground, stirring up a layer of dust. Pooh! In midair, Yuluo's body swayed for a moment before she spat out a mouthful of blood. Your Highness! Seeing this, Nietion's figure moved and came to Yuluo's side. He supported her and asked, Are you all right? I'm fine. I just expended too much energy. Yuluo shook her head lightly. She wanted to push Niet Tian away, but her body swayed, and she almost fell to the ground. You don't have to force yourself at a time like this. Niet Tian frowned and released the energy of the earth vein source into Yuluo's body. Thank you. After a while, Yuluo's complexion improved slightly. The wounds all over her body also started to heal slowly. She smiled faintly and thanked Niet Tian. Your Highness Saintess is too polite. I'm just doing my part as a friend, Niet Tian said with a faint smile. So, you're finally willing to be friends with this Saintess. Yuluo couldn't help but smile as she looked at Niet Tian with a strange gaze. As long as your Highness doesn't shed all pretense of cordiality, then we can always be friends. Niet Tian nodded with a smile, his expression indifferent. The relationship between him and the Rakshasa Saintess was not an ordinary friendship. It could only be said that they were not enemies yet. The Rakshasa Saintess would not give up on the Star Essence Stones so easily, and Niet Tian would never hand over the Star Essence Stones. Therefore, Niet Tian did not want to be too close to the Rakshasa Saintess. Otherwise, it would be very embarrassing when they fell out. Yuluo chuckled and did not say anything else. Following that, Yuluo took out the Heaven Devourer's beast core and placed it into the Heaven's Choice token. Of course, Niet Tian would not snatch it. After all, the Heaven Devourer was killed by Yuluo. Even if he killed the Heaven Devourer, he would not snatch the beast core. To be honest, he did not really care about the points. When Niet Tian and Yuluo walked out of the valley, Jiang Yin and Tung Hua were stunned when they saw them. Niet Tian looked at the pair of brother and sister and realized that they had a guilty look on their faces. He could not help but look at the Doomsday Devourer's corpse on the ground and immediately understood. The two of them had already removed all the beast cores. There were more than 10 Earth Devourers here. Calculating the points, it was close to 100 points. 100 points was definitely a shocking number. One had to know that when Niet Tian stepped onto the Heaven Yellow Stairway, he only obtained 20 points. Lord Niet Tian, Jiang'an's expression was ugly, and he did not know what to say. They had originally thought that Niet Tian would not be a match for the Heaven Devourer, so they wanted to take the beast cores and leave immediately. Who knew that Niet Tian would actually walk out of the valley so quickly? Jiang Yin, you two brother and sister are not polite at all. Niet Tian laughed, a strange look in his eyes. Niet Tian, are they your friends? At this time, Yuluo walked over and asked Niet Tian coldly. You can say so. Niet Tian nodded and laughed. Since they're your friends, these points will be given to them. Yuluo's beautiful eyes flickered as she said indifferently. Niet Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at Yuluo in disbelief. He did not expect the latter to say that. He thought that Jiang Yin and Tung Hua would be very angry at Yuluo for snatching the beast cores. It seemed that Yuluo was intentionally expressing goodwill towards Niet Tian. However, she was obviously a little blind. Jiang Yin and Tung Hua could not be considered as friends at all. Thank you, Your Highness. Thank you, Lord Niet Tian. At this time, Tung Hua reacted. He was very smart and quickly nodded. Niet Tian frowned and did not say anything more. Since Yuluo was willing to give the beast cores to Jiang Yin and Tung Hua, he could not possibly snatch the beast cores, right? Moreover, Niet Tian felt that a piece of 4 strange god soul stone was worth so many beast cores. At this time, Yuluo's beautiful eyes flickered as she looked at Jiang Yin and Tung Hua and asked, You two are from the 4 Strange Academy, right? Yes. Jiang Yin nodded, and his eyes could not help but be a little uneasy. Since you two have gathered together, it seems that you two have 4 strange god soul stones, right? Yuluo frowned slightly and said indifferently. Jiang Yin and Tung Hua were stunned at the same time. Clearly, they did not expect Yuluo to know about 4 strange god soul stones. However, in the next moment, the two of them froze and looked at Niet Tian in unison. Your Highness, the 4 strange god soul stones are with me. Niet Tian smiled faintly and said to Yuluo, Oh! Yuluo was surprised, and then she smiled and said, It seems that you specially rushed over to save me. It seems that your Highness is very familiar with the 4 strange god soul stones. Niet Tian smiled and said indifferently, Yuluo's understanding of the four strange god soul stones surprised him. Nietian, I want to borrow your four strange god soul stones to find a few people. Can I? The corner of Yuluo's mouth twitched. She did not beat around the bush and said directly, Sure, but your highness will have to wait for a while. Nietian nodded slightly. If you want to find your friends, I will go with you. Yuluo guessed what Nietian wanted to do next and took the initiative to say, Okay. Nietian nodded and smiled. Even if Yuluo was seriously injured now, her combat power should not be underestimated. It was good to have her by his side. Then, Nietian tried to sense the four strange god soul stones, but he still could not sense the divine soul aura of Cher and Rui Qinyu. Jiang'an, are you sure that the four strange god soul stones have recorded the divine soul aura of all the heavens chosen ones? Nietian frowned and asked Jiang'in. Yes. Jiang'in nodded heavily and was very sure. Then why can't I sense the divine soul aura of two martial artists? Nietian's face sank and continued to ask. I can't sense the divine soul aura. Either the martial artists are thousands of miles away or the martial artists are dead. Jiang'in nodded and said, Huh. When Nietian heard Jiang'in's words, he could not help but tremble and his heart suddenly sank. Chapter 3049. Enemies. Nietian's expression darkened. He began to worry about Cher and Rui Qinyu. Lord Nietian, the entire Doomsday Forest is tens of thousands of miles wide. You can't sense anyone, so they might be thousands of miles away, Jiang'in said when he saw Nietian's worry. Nietian nodded. He could only assume that for now. He felt that with Cher and Rui Qinyu's strength, they would not be in danger unless they encountered a heaven devourer or the strongest few heavens chosen ones. The Doomsday Forest was so big. Cher and Rui Qinyu should be fine. EMO. Nietian then sensed the other's spiritual auras and quickly locked onto Emo's position. He was about 500 to 600 miles away from him. Then let's find EMO first. Nietian nodded. He planned to find EMO first. However, at this moment, Jiang'in seemed to have discovered something. His eyes couldn't help but tremble as he exclaimed, Lord Nietian, look, there's an aura approaching us. It seems to be coming for us. Nietian's eyes narrowed and his expression darkened. He found that a spiritual aura was rushing towards them from the four strange soul stones. Strange. Nietian couldn't help but frown, confusion filling his face. This aura was very fast, and its target was clear. It was coming straight for them, as if it knew where they were. Lord Nietian, judging from the spiritual aura, this person's strength is around rank 3 false holiness, Jiang'in said nervously. He was clearly more familiar with the four strange soul stones than Nietian. He could actually tell the person's strength. Rank 3 false holiness. Could it be someone from the Jueying Temple? Nietian frowned, and his expression darkened. This time, there were tens of thousands of heaven's chosen ones. Among them, there were less than 100 who had the strength of a false sage. As for those who had the strength of a third-stage false sage, they could be counted on one hand. Nietian remembered that during the Heaven's Chosen Path platform test, Jueying Temple had 2 third-level pseudo-saints. Thus, his first thought was that this third-level pseudo-saint was most likely from the Jueying Shrine. At that moment, the aura suddenly sped up. In the blink of an eye, it was only tens of thousands of meters away from Nietian and the others. This person has come with ill intentions. I'm afraid he's here for us. Yuluo's beautiful eyes flickered as she spoke in a deep voice. How did he know where we are? Nietian frowned, his face full of doubt. The direction of this aura was very clear. It was almost charging straight towards them. Clearly, it knew where they were. Don't think so much for now. Prepare for battle. Yuluo frowned and said coldly, Lord Nietian. Jiang'in and Tenghua's expressions changed slightly. They couldn't help but hide behind Nietian. Don't worry. Since I've already promised to protect your safety, I will definitely do it. Nietian smiled faintly, his eyes surging with determination. Even if this person had the strength of a third-stage false sage, it still wouldn't scare him. Whoosh! At that moment, There was the sound of something slicing through the air. Then, a figure descended from the sky, landing steadily in front of Nyetian and the others. His eyes were cold and murderous. It really is someone from the Juying shrine. Nyetian looked at the person who had come, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly as he spoke. Although he didn't know the person's name, he had seen this face before. It was the Juying shrine martialist who had been standing with Shadow Flame Destroyer and the others. When the person saw Nyetian, he was first stunned, then his eyes lit up. He cried out in pleasant surprise, "I've come to find the people from the 4 strange academies. I didn't expect to find the biggest prey. It seems that my luck is pretty good." When Nyetian heard this person's words, his eyes narrowed slightly. He turned to look at Jiang In and Tung Hua. It was obvious that the person in front of them had come for the 4 Oddities Academy's senior and junior sister. "Yes, I am the biggest prey, but I am also the most dangerous prey." Then, Nyetian let out a laugh and said, "You're not lucky to have met me, but extremely unlucky. Is that so?" The newcomer sneered and stared at Nyetian with cold, disdainful eyes as he said in a loud voice, "Nyetian, do you know who I am? I am second only to Shadow Flame Destroyer in the Juying Shrine. Remember my name. I am Fifth Thunder Shadow, because you will soon die at the hands of Fifth Thunder Shadow." Fifth Thunder Shadow. Nyetian looked at Fifth Thunder Shadow and couldn't help but sneer. "You really are as stupid as your name." Fifth Thunder Shadow felt the contempt in Nyetian's eyes. His face suddenly darkened, and his aura suddenly rose violently. Behind him, a bolt of black lightning appeared. It was thousands of meters long and floated in the air like a giant snake standing on its hind legs. At that moment, Yulua stepped forward and said, "Nyetian, you are no match for him. Let me do it." Rakshasa Maiden. When Fifth Thunder Shadow saw Yulua, he couldn't help but cry out. He had only just noticed Yulua's existence. Before, he had been too focused on Jiang In, and then all his attention had been drawn to Nyetian. He had actually ignored Yulua. "A mere ant from the Juying Shrine dares to be so arrogant in front of me?" Yulua shouted. Her petite body shook slightly, and an invisible aura shot up into the sky. The void suddenly sank, as if it was about to split open from the pressure. Fifth Thunder Shadow's eyes trembled. His aura had been suppressed by Yulua. The black lightning behind him seemed to sense danger and actually shook, as if it was trembling. Fifth Thunder Shadow was so shocked that his figure subconsciously retreated. But at that moment, Yulua's chest heaved, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face immediately turned deathly pale. She had just fought with the Sky Devourer and had been seriously injured. Now that she was forcefully operating her Yuan meridians, the pressure was great. Injured, Fifth Thunder Shadow's eyes lit up when he saw this. Then he laughed wildly and said, "Your Highness, if you were at your peak, I naturally wouldn't be a match for you. But now that you are so seriously injured, how can you fight me?" After saying that, his eyes suddenly became cold, and his killing intent was heavy. He had originally come to find Jiang In and the others, but he had not expected to meet Nyetian and Yulua. He did not care about Nyetian's strength at all. He did not consider Nyetian an opponent at all. And Yulua, who he feared, had been so seriously injured. Wasn't this the same as the heavens helping him? Ha ha! I really did not expect that the dignified Rakshasa, holy lady, would die at the hands of me. Fifth Thunder Shadow. Fifth Thunder Shadow laughed wildly, his aura extremely arrogant. Yulua smiled cold and said fiercely, "A mere dog of Juying Temple wants to kill me? What a joke! Even if I am injured, killing you is still as easy as turning over my hand." Boom! As her arrogant voice fell, Yuluoho took a step forward. Her entire body suddenly released an incomparably huge force, causing the void to rumble. Suddenly, a majestic force that rolled like the sea was released, condensed into an invisible giant hand in the air, and smashed towards Ingwule. Hand of nothingness. Nyetian felt the void tremble. His eyes darkened, and he exclaimed at his heart, He had just seen Yulua use this move. It was the hand of nothingness of the myriad universe devourer. Nietion had seen with his own eyes the hand of nothingness forcibly twist off the sky devourer's head. Its power was beyond imagination. Chapter 3050. Come and take it, Buzz. In the void, the invisible devouring power suddenly descended, causing the void to groan, as if it would be torn apart in the next moment. In an instant, the fifth thunder shadow felt a terrifying pressure pressing down on him, making him feel the aura of death in the most real sense. Yulua cultivated the sacred tier martial art, the myriad universe devouring art. So even if her strength was only at the rank 4 pseudo-sage, her true combat strength far surpassed martial artists of the same rank. The Hand of Nothingness was one of her 3 strongest moves. Using it on Fifth Thunder now was somewhat overkill. One had to know that the power of the Hand of Nothingness was enough to snap the head of a heaven-rank devourer. Fifth Thunder's martial body obviously could not be compared to a heaven-ranked devourer. If this palm landed, Fifth Thunder would die without a doubt. Fifth Thunder's face was ashen, his expression dull. He was completely scared out of his wits, motionless like a wooden stake. But in that instant between life and death, the huge power in the void suddenly disappeared. At the same time, Yulua's body trembled, and she vomited a mouthful of blood. Her pretty face was as pale as paper, without any color. In that instant, her Yuan Meridian could not withstand the powerful pressure and directly tore. "Your Highness." Seeing this, Nietion could not help but tremble, and he cried out. Then his figure moved, arriving beside Yulua, and supported her. "Nietion, Yulua's face was pale, and she turned her head with difficulty to look at Nietion. The moment she opened her mouth, she actually fainted. Oh no! Nietion's divine sense sensed Yulua's Yuan Meridian, and his face instantly darkened. Yulua was already severely injured, and now that her Yuan Meridian was directly injured, it became even more serious. Nietion did not see that Yulua was actually injured so badly. If he had seen it earlier, he definitely would not have let Yulua make a move. In the end, Yulua was too headstrong. At this moment, Fifth Thunder reacted and immediately became overjoyed, laughing loudly. "Rakshasa, holy maiden, so this is all you have? You guys are dead meat." As he spoke in a voice that was close to insanity, Fifth Thunder's body shook and his aura surged. The power of black lightning appeared once again, and with a single move, a huge black lightning palm appeared in the air and slammed down on Nietion and Yuluo. "Lord Nietion, watch out!" Jiang Yin and Tung Hua couldn't help but exclaim at the same time. Nietion's eyes narrowed. With a thought, he directly placed Yulua into the 9 extremities. Yulua's Yuan Meridian had already been damaged, and her injuries were extremely severe. If she were to be affected further, it was very likely that she would lose her life. However, after Nietion placed Yulua into the 9 extremities, he was a step too late when he wanted to make a move. Boom! In a hurry, he had no choice but to activate the Water Pole Heavenly Origin Armor and the Star Soul Shield to defend passively. Bang! In the next instant, the huge black lightning palm landed directly on Nietion's body. His figure was directly sent flying, smashing through several huge 3-sun woods in the air, and then landed heavily on the ground. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Lord Nietion, Jiang Yin, and Tung Hua's eyes trembled violently, and they cried out in fear, their faces as pale as paper. Fifth Thunder's target was them, and if Nietion died, they would not survive either. At this moment, Fifth Thunder sneered and said, "People of the 4 Wonders Academies, your Lord Nietion is already dead. Even a 3rd-stage false saint would die without a doubt after taking my cloud-startling lightning palm head on. He's just a 5th-stage demi-saint. He would have been blown to smithereens long ago." That, Jiang Yin and Tung Hua's expressions froze at the same time, and they were instantly speechless. "You 2 pieces of trash," obediently hand over the 4 Wonders Spirit Stones. Fifth Thunder sneered, stepped forward, and looked at Jiang In with a gloomy gaze. "You're here for the Four Wonders Spirit Stones?" Jiang In smiled blankly, and only then did he understand the other party's purpose. The Four Wonders Spirit Stones were the sacred stones of the Four Wonders Academies, and many people knew about them. Fifth Thunder was from the Juying Temple, so it was not surprising that he knew about the Four Wonders Spirit Stones. But Jiang did not understand how Fifth Thunder had found them. It's a waste for something as good as the four divine soul stones to be in your hands. Fifth Thunder smiled cold and said, "In fact, Shadowfire Ruinous Star had already left a Juying mark on you back on the Heaven's Chosen platform, but you didn't know about it." "So?" Jiang An's expression froze, and then his eyes trembled as he said, "So you've been eyeing the Four Wonders Spirit Stones for a long time. You're not too stupid, but you're just too weak." Fifth Thunder walked over step by step, and the cold look in his eyes intensified as he said coldly, "Now, hand over the Four Wonders Spirit Stones." "The Four Wonders Spirit Stones are not with me." Jiang could not help but tremble as he felt Fifth Thunder's murderous intent. "Not with you?" Fifth Thunder was stunned for a moment, and he could not help but frown. At that moment, a low, murderous voice sounded. "The Four Wonders Spirit Stones are with me. If you have the strength, come and take them." A cold voice echoed out, causing Fifth Thunder's eyes to flicker uncontrollably. Then, he spun around and saw a familiar figure. "Nie Tian, you're not dead?" Fifth Thunder's eyes trembled as he looked at Nie Tian in disbelief. He could not believe his eyes. Nie Tian was still alive. But how was that possible? Nie Tian only had the strength of a stage 5 demi-saint, and there was no way he could have withstood his cloud-startling thunderpalm. Unless Nie Tian's martial body was even more terrifying than a stage 3 demi-saint powerhouse. "You think you can kill me just like that? You're overestimating yourself." Nie Tianling smiled coldly, and his eyes were filled with cold contempt. "You're courting death." Fifth Thunder was instantly enraged. He roared and stomped hard on the ground, causing it to crack. His figure leaped into the air, and the cloud's startling thunder appeared behind him again. He struck out with his palm, and the black thunderbolt condensed into a thunderbolt arrow, oppressing the void and bombarding toward Nie Tian. Sacred heaven-defying sword. Earth sword engulfs the moon. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and his entire body's sword momentum soared into the sky. The violent sword will suddenly surged out, and, at the same time, there was also a surge of blood chi. Boom! In the next moment, the blood-colored sword's shadow shot into the sky, and a terrifying aura surged in the air like a raging dragon. Boom! Immediately, the thunderbolt arrow and the blood-colored sword's shadow collided, and there was a terrible roar in the void. Suddenly, endless power surged and spread in all directions, turning the sky chaotic. The figures of Nie Tian and Fifth Thunder were instantly submerged by the raging waves and disappeared. This! Jiang In and Tung Hua could not help but gasp when they saw this scene. Their expressions were completely lifeless, and they were completely speechless. They did not expect that Nie Tian could fight with Fifth Thunder to this extent. After a long time, the raging waves in the sky dissipated, and two figures appeared. It was Nie Tian and Fifth Thunder. At this time, the two of them were facing each other in the sky, like two mountains. The sword wheel around Nie Tian was surging like raging waves. Chapter 3051. Nothing more than this. Nie Tian, your strength has exceeded my expectations, but you'll die without a doubt in this battle. Up in the sky, Fifth Thunder spoke in a cold voice. The two cloud-startling mysterious bombs behind him were like two huge lightning snakes, surging and releasing a terrifying aura of thunder. Is that so? The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. His eyes were not filled with fear, but with a strong desire to fight. Fifth Thunder was indeed a genius, second only to Shadow Flame Ruinous Star. Although he was only a third-rank False Sage, his battle strength was definitely not weaker than a fifth-rank False Sage. This battle was more difficult than Nie Tian had expected. You're still so arrogant when you're at death's door? Fifth Thunder was enraged. His eyes were as fierce as a beast's, and his killing intent was sharp. Cloud's startling, mysterious bomb, bone-breaking claw. Immediately afterwards, he let out a bellow, and the two Cloud's shocking, profound bombs behind him rumbled, causing the void to tremble in an instant. In the next moment, the two Cloud's shocking, profound bombs intertwined and morphed into a terrifyingly sharp claw that slammed down towards Nyetian. Good timing. When Nyetian felt the pressure of the lightning, he laughed wildly. Then, the 9 supreme dragon veins in his body began to circulate crazily. Streams of majestic dragon chi were released, forming a sea of lightning behind him. Boom! The next moment, the endless power of thunder and lightning condensed into a giant red dragon. The dragon's body was tens of thousands of meters long. Every whisker, every claw, every scale was extremely delicate and lifelike, as if it had a body of flesh and blood. Roar! Following that, the gigantic crimson dragon let out a furious roar towards the sky. The terrifying might of the dragon spread out in the void, shaking the heavens and the earth, causing the surroundings to tremble. At this moment, it was as if the entire world was crawling at the feet of the giant red dragon. Jiang En and Tung Hua were completely shocked when they saw this. Their eyes trembled and their expressions were dull. They never dreamed that Nyetian could release such a terrifying dragon chi and condense a giant red dragon that was tens of thousands of meters long. In the blink of an eye, the fifth Thunder Shadow sensed the majestic aura of the dragon. He could not help but exclaim in surprise. Nyetian's strength had once again exceeded his expectations. At this moment, the figure of the scarlet dragon moved. Like a huge mountain, it rolled in the void and suddenly stretched out its dragon claws. It slashed across the sky and forcibly crushed the bone-breaking claw formed by the Cloud, startling, mysterious bomb. The power of the mysterious lightning was directly absorbed by the scarlet dragon. How is this possible? The sudden turn of events shocked Fifth Thunder. He let out a cry, and his eyes were filled with unconcealable shock. The scarlet dragon's power was too terrifying, far exceeding his expectations. Only now did he realize that the power of lightning around the crimson dragon was actually suppressing his Cloud-startling bomb. He felt that it was not bad. It was because of this suppression that the scarlet dragon could shatter the bone claw so easily. Fifth Thunder Shadow, is this all you've got? Nyetian stood on the crimson dragon high up in the sky. His killing intent was heavy as he shouted. How arrogant! Fifth Thunder Shadow roared angrily. His body shook and a layer of blood chi spread out from his body. Then, 3 Clouds' startling, mysterious bombs appeared behind him at the same time. Their auras were even more violent than the previous ones. He seemed to have used some kind of forbidden technique to forcibly activate the 3rd Cloud, startling, mysterious bomb. Nyetian, this is the first time I've used the Thunderclap forbidden technique. Fifth Thunder Shadow's eyes turned cold, and he said loudly, It's your good fortune to be killed by the Thunderclap forbidden technique. Humph! Nyetianling stood on the head of the dragon and looked down at Fifth Thunder Shadow. He sneered and said arrogantly, You want to kill me with just 3 mysterious bombs? You're dreaming. Fifth Thunder Shadow was once again despised. He couldn't help but be enraged. He roared like a wild beast. You're courting death. In the next moment, he charged madly towards Nyetian. The 3 Cloud shocking profound bombs behind him instantly morphed into a terrifyingly huge beast that was over 10,000 meters long. Roaring, it pounced towards Nyetian with full force in midair. In front of my shocking thunder beast, do you think your dragon still has the strength to fight? Ing Wulei's figure stepped on the shocking thunder beast and laughed wildly. Humph! Nyetianling sneered. His eyes were full of disdain. Then, a stream of demonic energy surged out of his body and directly entered the body of the giant red dragon. Roar! The giant red dragon was stimulated by the demonic energy, and the thunderbolts in its body instantly became violent. Streaks of lightning struck the sky and formed a lightning net that was tens of thousands of meters long. Fifth Thunder Shadow's eyes trembled in fear when he felt the powerful energy of the giant red dragon. Die. At this moment, Nietion's eyes turned cold and the corner of his mouth twitched. The giant red dragon under his feet roared to the sky. The dragon's roar was earth-shattering, and the violent dragon energy shook the sky. Boom! In the next instant, the crimson dragon moved. It was like a giant mountain of lightning as it charged toward the thunderclap behemoth. At this moment, Fifth Thunder Shadow felt a terrifying pressure. The thunderclap beast under his feet was trembling as if it was about to collapse. Don't kill me. In the blink of an eye, he understood that the thunderclap beast couldn't withstand a single blow from the scarlet dragon. The sudden feeling of despair caused him to cry out. Unfortunately, it was too late. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. The giant red dragon's figure suddenly descended. The moment its giant claw landed on the thunderclap beast, its body began to crack and turned into a stream of Xian lightning energy that was absorbed by the giant red dragon. Boom! Boom! At this moment, a crimson bolt of lightning tore through the sky and descended directly onto Ying Wulei's body. The latter's body trembled, and he didn't even have the time to let out a final shriek before his entire body was turned into ashes. The second genius of the Jueying Shrine, second only to Shadow Flame Ruinous Star, had died a tragic death. The second genius is only SOSO. Nietion stood in the air and smiled coldly. With a thought, the giant red dragon under his feet disappeared. Then, his figure moved, and he landed on the ground. In front of him, Jiang Yin and Teng Hua were already shocked beyond belief. They looked at Nietion with trembling eyes and couldn't speak for a long time. Nietion's eyes darkened. He didn't care about the two of them at all. With a thought, he opened the 9 extremities to see how Yuluo was doing. Nietion. However, at this moment, Fat Cat's voice suddenly rang out. It sounded a little panicked and surprised. Nietion was stunned. He didn't know what was going on. Boom! At this moment, there was a huge explosion in the distance. Nietion was taken aback. He saw that the ground in the distance was shaking violently, as if there was a colossal creature moving under the ground. The next moment, he felt a very strong, devouring aura appear all around him. This aura was the aura of the Doomsday Devourer. What's going on? Nietion furrowed his brows, his expression changing drastically as he asked in astonishment, how come so many Doomsday Devourers suddenly appeared? Chapter 3052. Chapter 3047. Devouring Army. We're surrounded. When Nietion heard Fat Cat's words, his eyes trembled and his face darkened. He had already sensed the strong, devouring aura around them, but he did not expect the situation to be so serious. They were surrounded by Doomsday Devourers. Lord, Nietion, there seems to be a lot of Doomsday Devourers auras. What's going on? At this moment, Jiang also felt it. He looked at Nietion with a horrified expression, his voice trembling as he spoke. Are we surrounded by Doomsday Devourers? Teng Hua's pretty face stiffened, but he immediately reacted. His face was ashen. Follow behind me. Nietion's eyes darkened as he glanced at Jiang In and Teng Hua coldly. He did not expect that releasing the dragon energy would attract so many Doomsday Devourers. It seemed like Doomsday Devourers had a special preference for dragon energy. This made Nietion think of something, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Perhaps he could use the dragon energy to find the Doomsday Devourer. But now, he had to think of a way to leave this place. Jiang In and Teng Hua were panicking. They stuck close to Nietion, not daring to be more than 5 meters away from him. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, there was a series of explosions. The surrounding triple sun trees were like saplings in a gale, falling one after another. Then, black shadows that were burning with flames appeared, and a black mass rushed over from all directions. F***CK. When Nietion saw this, his eyes trembled, and he could not help but curse. He knew he was surrounded by Doomsday Devourers, but he did not expect there to be so many of them. At a glance, there were almost 10,000 Doomsday Devourers in the surroundings. Lord, Nietion, Jiang'an's face stiffened when he saw the formation in front of him. He was so scared that he could not speak. Enter 9 extremities. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he opened 9 extremities. Originally, he thought that there were only a few dozen Doomsday Devourers. As long as Jiang In and Tung Hua followed him closely, they would be able to escape. However, with so many Doomsday Devourers, Nietian would have a hard time escaping alone, let alone bringing Jiang In and Tung Hua along. He could only let the 2 of them enter the 9 extremities first, so that the burden on his side would be reduced and their chances of escaping would be greater. Yes, yes. Jiang In nodded repeatedly and entered the 9 superbs with Tung Hua without hesitation. Whoa! At this moment, countless Doomsday Devourers rushed over, growling incessantly, their scarlet eyes filled with bloodlust. Nietian immediately felt the space around him heat up, as if he was in a furnace. He took a look and saw that most of the Doomsday Devourers were at the human rank. There were only a few Earth Devourers and a few Heaven Devourers. Leave! In the next instant, he moved. Astral soul wings appeared on his back. With a flap of his wings, he soared into the sky. Roar, roar, roar. At the same time, countless Doomsday Devourers roared as hundreds and thousands of Doomsday Devourers leaped into the air, launching their attacks. Numerous flaming blades appeared, blotting out the sky as they slashed towards Nietian. Nietian knew how terrifying those flaming blades were. He didn't dare to face them head-on. Relying on his agility, he dodged left and right. But no matter how agile he was unable to dodge the torrential rain of flaming blades. Bang, bang, bang. Over 10 flaming blades bombarded the astral soul shield around Nietian's body. Although they weren't able to break the shield, the blazing, devouring aura seeped through the shield and directly into Nietian's body. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Nietian felt waves of devouring aura rushing madly within his body, as though they wanted to devour all the meridians in his body. Fortunately, the first wave of flaming blades passed very quickly. Roar! Nietian steadied himself. His 9 dragon veins revolved at the same time, and a deafening dragon roar resounded from his body, forcefully forcing the devouring aura out of his body. Following which, the wings on his back flapped madly, and his figure became like a stream of light, soaring into the sky. Roar, roar, roar. But the Doomsday Devourers below clearly didn't intend to give up just like that. They all madly rushed forward, chasing relentlessly. Nietian's figure was very fast, but he wasn't as fast as the Doomsday Devourers. In an instant, a few hundred Doomsday Devourers actually chased after him. Damn it! Nietian looked over his shoulder and cursed. Swish, swish, swish. And at this moment, the dozen Doomsday Devourers at the front suddenly increased their speed. Numerous flaming blades appeared, carrying with them an extremely dense, devouring aura, attacking Nietian. I'll slaughter all of you. Nietian's figure suddenly stopped in the air. Immediately, his entire body surged with sword force, and 12 heaven-slaying sword shadows appeared, like a collapsing mountain, bombarding the Doomsday Devourers below. Bang, 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 following which a series of muffled sounds rang out, and where the sword shadows landed, a dozen Doomsday Devourers were directly sent flying. Nietian activated the 12 heaven-slaying sword formation, but it only slightly blocked the Doomsday Devourers' attack. And on the other side, more Doomsday Devourers swarmed over, squeezing together like a dark cloud burning with flames, rolling over. Although these were all human-level Devourers, there were so many of them, and they posed a great threat to Nietian. Nietian had to distance himself from the Doomsday Devourers, or else once they got close, he would undoubtedly die. 8 Desolation's sword slash. High up in the sky, Nietian let out a low roar and slashed out with his sword. Waves of sword energy rolled out and pressed down like raging waves, but it only slightly hindered the Doomsday Devourer army's attack. Using this moment of respite, Nietian flapped his wings and flew up into the sky. But at this time, more than a dozen Doomsday Devourers had appeared behind him out of nowhere. Oh no! Suddenly feeling that something was wrong, Nietion's face sank. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this time, more than a dozen flaming blades pierced through the air, extremely sharp, and shot towards Nietion. Nietion suddenly turned around, his eyes trembling. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. If these attacks descended at the same time, although they could not kill Nietion, they would definitely be able to seriously injure him. Boom! At that critical moment, Nietion suddenly felt a cold aura descend upon him with a loud rumble. EMO! Nietion suddenly looked up and saw a familiar face, and could not help but shout in surprise. He did not expect that the person who appeared at this critical moment would be EMO. Crack, crack, crack! At this time, the chill swept past, and wherever it passed, space instantly froze, and the dozen flaming blades instantly crumbled under the impact of the chill. Nietion was stunned by the scene in front of him, and could not help but stare. Emo's chill was so terrifying that it had directly blocked the dozen flaming blades. Not even Nietion could do that. It was not that Nietion was underestimating Emo, but the latter was only a demi-saint, and his combat ability should not be this strong. Chapter 3053. On the verge of death, roar, roar, roar. At this moment, the Doomsday Devourer army pounced over even more ferociously. They were like a surging sea of fire, incomparably violent. Nietion furrowed his brows as he felt a powerful devouring aura rushing towards him. Nietion stepped back. Emo frowned and let out a low roar. His silhouette flickered, and two pairs of ice demon wings appeared on his back. The four wings flapped together, and an incomparably large amount of ice chi howled out, condensing into a 10,000-meter-long ice hand in the air. It smashed down, causing the space around it to tremble. Bang, bang, bang. Following that, the cold, fiendish hand descended, and endless muffled sounds resounded in the air. Hundreds of Doomsday Devourers were sent flying, and they let out miserable howls in the air. When Nietion saw this, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes and stare blankly. Emo's palm strike wasn't very strong, so how could it strike down so many Doomsday Devourers at the same time? One must know that even a human-level Devourer's battle prowess was equivalent to a rank 1 pseudo-sage human. On the other hand, Emo was merely a demi-saint. A rank 6 demi-saint repelled hundreds of pseudo-saints with a single palm. How could such a scene not be shocking? Even the current Nietion couldn't do it. The Doomsday Devourer's devouring flames were a type of fire attribute energy, while Emo's fiendish cold energy was a type of ice attribute energy. It wasn't strange for ice and fire to restrain each other. However, Emo's fiendish cold aura seemed to be able to suppress devouring flames. This puzzled Nietion. There seems to be some kind of dark aura in the Doomsday Devourer's body, and it just so happens to be restrained by this Wing Tribe kid's angel bloodline. At this moment, the fat cat's deep voice rang out. Angel bloodline? Nietion was stunned for a moment, a puzzled look on his face. He only knew that Emo was a member of the Wings of Frost and was a descendant of the sacred race. How could he have the bloodline of an angel? The Wraithwings clan is the descendant of the sacred angel clan, Fat Cat said, but did not continue. Nietion couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, feeling even more puzzled in his heart. He remembered that Niechingwan's mother, Lu Li, was a radiant angel. She should also be a descendant of the Holy Angel clan. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Niechingwan and Emo to communicate in a special way. However, Fat Cat clearly did not want to say too much, and Nietion did not mind. In any case, it was a good thing that Emo could suppress the Doomsday Devourer. Fat, with Emo's current strength, can he face a heaven-level Devourer head-on? At this time, Nietion's figure came to a safe place high up. Suddenly, his eyes flickered and he asked with slight excitement, Nietion, it seems that you still haven't given up on unsealing the Heaven and Earth Saint runes. Fat Cat, of course, knew what Nietion was thinking and could not help but laugh. If Emo can fight against a Heaven Devourer, then he can fight against a Formation Core Devourer. Nietion laughed and said excitedly. He was thinking that he might be able to use Emo's strength to destroy the Devourer. However, he was not sure if the current EMO could fight against a Heaven Devourer. The Wing Clan boy's angel bloodline has a strong suppressive force against the Doomsday Devourer. With his current strength, he can easily kill an Earth-level Devourer, but if he wants to fight a Heaven-level Devourer head-on, it's still a little too much. Fat Cat's eyes narrowed slightly and said solemnly. When Yetion heard Fat Cat's words, he could not help but frown. Bang, bang, bang. At this time, a series of muffled sounds rang out. EMO actually forced back the Doomsday Devourer army with his own strength. Strong. Yetion could not help but exclaim when he saw this scene. EMO's figure moved and flew towards the sky. The Doomsday Devourers below seemed to be very afraid of him and did not chase after him. Yetion, are you okay? EMO came in Yetion's side and asked faintly. I'm fine, thank you. Yetion nodded and smiled. Previously, he sensed that EMO was not far away from him from the 4 strange God Soul Stones. He originally wanted to find EMO, but the sudden appearance of the 5th Thunder Shadow stopped him. It seemed that EMO saw the movement here and rushed over. Your Highness Saintus. At this time, Yetion suddenly thought of the Rakshasa Saintus and could not help but exclaim. He immediately opened the 9 extreme gates and entered. EMO stood guard outside and did not enter. Lord Yetion, when Jiang En and Tung Hua saw Yetion appear, their eyes lit up and they trembled. They said nervously, Look, Your Highness Saintus seems to be dying. Yetion's eyes darkened as he looked at the Rakshasa Saintus. The latter's body actually had a bloody wound, rolling outwards and bleeding profusely. The bloody wound was very strange, as if it had split open from the inside of her body. Oh no! Yetion's divine sense sensed the Rakshasa Saintus's body, and his face instantly turned gloomy. The Rakshasa Saintus's injuries were more serious than he had imagined. Her yuan meridians were also badly injured, almost rupturing, causing her entire martial body to be in a fragmented state. I have to stabilize her yuan meridians first. Yetion took a deep breath and calmed down. He once again released the power of the earth vein source and slowly transferred it into Yulua's body. Powerful life force flowed into Yulua's body, and Yulua's 9 yuan meridians were finally stabilized. The external wounds on her body began to heal slowly. Phew! After a long time, Yetion exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His forehead was already covered in beads of sweat, and his face was very pale. He had completely transferred his own life force into Yulua's body to forcefully preserve her life. Yetion, this method of yours is only treating the symptoms and not the root cause. It is only temporarily stabilizing her yuan meridians. If the wounds on her yuan meridians cannot heal, she will still not be able to live. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded, and it said in a deep voice, This is troublesome. Yetion took out a divine pill and swallowed it. His face became very gloomy. He did not expect Yulua to be so seriously injured. If he had known earlier, he would definitely not have let Yulua take action. Yetion, when this little girl was fighting with the Heaven Realm Devourer, too much of the devouring flame seeped into her body. Even if she did not take action, her yuan meridians would still slowly collapse under the burning of the devouring flame. Fat spoke again. If you want to save her now, you must first find a way to force the devouring flame out of her body. I will force the devouring flame out now. Yetion's eyes trembled, and he said excitedly, No. The little fat cat cried out in alarm and said, Your strength is not enough, and her martial body is too weak. If you force out the devouring flame, it will cause her yuan meridian to collapse. At that time, even if she can keep her life, she will become a cripple. Then what should we do? Yetion's eyes darkened, and his expression stiffened. The only person who can help her now is that girl with the 9-colored pupils. Fat Cat's expression darkened slightly, and it said in a deep voice, Rui Qinyu. Yetion's eyes trembled. He did not expect Fat Cat to mention Rui Qinyu. Chapter 3054. Formation I Devour. All right, I'll go look for Qinyu now. Yetion nodded and said in a deep voice, However, in the next moment, his face darkened and his expression froze. He had no idea where Cher and Rui Chinyu were. What was even more strange was that the four gods' soul stones did not detect their auras. It was very strange. Fat, how long can the saintess last in her current condition? Nietan asked as his eyes darkened. Based on her current condition, she can last for 3 days at most. Fat Cat nodded and said solemnly, 3 days. Nietan's eyes trembled, and he could not help but be dumbfounded. The Doomsday Jungle was so huge. It was too difficult for him to find Rui Chinyu in 3 days. Nietan, you can ask EMO to freeze the saintess first. That way, we can buy more time. Fat Cat's eyes flickered and said, okay. Nietan agreed, and then sent EMO into the 9 superbs. After the latter understood the situation, he quickly froze the Rakshasa Saintess. The Rakshasa Saintess can last for at least 2 months in the state of ice powder. You must find Rui Chinyu within a month, Fat Cat said and reminded Nietan. Yeah, Nietan nodded vigorously. 2 months was more than enough time for him to make up his mind. Then, Nietan asked Zhang In and Teng Hua to stay in the 9 superbs to take care of Yuluo. He also kept the 9 superbs open to prevent any accidents from happening to Yuluo. Nietan was about to leave and look for Rui Chinyu. However, at that moment, Fat Cat's voice was suddenly heard. Fat, what's wrong? Nietan asked curiously. There's one thing that I should tell you. The Fat Cat hesitated for a moment, but finally said, the formation I devour you're looking for is most likely down there. Really? When Nietan heard the Fat Cat's words, his eyes couldn't help but tremble as he exclaimed in surprise. Although he knew that the devourer of the formation I was very powerful, it was almost impossible to destroy it. However, he did not give up. After all, this was related to the Heaven and Earth Saint rune. If he could unlock a Heaven and Earth Saint rune, Nietan would have the power of a saint. How could he not be tempted? Now that the Fat Cat told him that the devourer of the formation I was down there, of course he was excited. In the next moment, Nietan became cold. He immediately reacted and said with trembling eyes, Fatty, are you saying that after I released the dragon energy, the devourer of the formation, I also appeared? Yes, the Fat Cat nodded and said, I'm guessing that the formation I devour is underground. Underground? Nietan's eyes trembled, and he was shocked. He didn't expect that the devourer of the formation I was underground. Now that he thought about it, he did feel the earth tremble and the ground bulge, as if there was a huge thing running under the ground. He didn't expect that the huge thing underground was the devourer of the formation I. Nietan, think about it. The devourer of the formation I is related to the safety of the entire formation. Of course, it's safest to hide underground. The corner of the Fat Cat's mouth twitched. I'm guessing that the devourer of the formation I was originally sleeping underground, but it suddenly woke up because of the influence of your dragon energy. But then your dragon energy disappeared, and the devourer of the formation I fell into a deep sleep again. The ground is calm now, but if you release the dragon energy, you'll definitely be able to attract the devourer of the formation I. Nietan's eyebrows furrowed as he immediately understood. The guy who built the Doomsday Jungle formation was very smart. He actually hid the formation I deep underground. If it wasn't for Nietan releasing the dragon energy and awakening the devourer of the formation I, he wouldn't have been able to find the formation I. He had to admit that the person who built the formation was indeed very smart. Fat, what should I do now? Should I release the dragon energy to attract the devourer of the formation I? Nietan's eyes trembled, and he asked excitedly. Nietan, whether it's you or the boy from the Wing Clan, neither of you have the ability to fight against the devourer of the formation I. Now, if you attract the devourer of the formation I, you must first record its spiritual aura on the 4 strange god soul stones. But you must never fight it head-on, understand? Fat Cat said after a long silence. Understood. Nietan's eyes flickered, and he said seriously. Fat Cat was worried that the devourer of the formation I was active underground, and it would be difficult for it to appear again in the future. So he asked Nyation to record its spiritual aura first. Nyation's gaze swept down, and he couldn't help but frown when he saw that the army of devourers had not dispersed. If he released the dragon energy at this time, it would definitely cause the army of devourers to go berserk, and they would definitely rush towards him. However, in order to attract the devourer of the formation eye, Nyation could only give it a try. After all, there weren't many opportunities like this before him. Then, Nyation briefly explained the situation to EMO and finally said, EMO, I need you to cover me and block the attack of the Doomsday Devourer. Okay. EMO didn't quite understand, but he didn't ask too much. Instead, he nodded heavily and said, I will definitely protect you. Thank you. Nyation nodded with a smile, and then his body shook, and a majestic dragon energy was released, instantly forming an ocean of dragon energy behind him. Roar, roar, roar. The huge aura of dragon energy spread in the void, causing the Doomsday Devourers below to directly become berserk, and they let out terrifying roars. Their blood-red eyes became even more violent and ferocious. Roar! At this time, the dragon energy around Nyation condensed into a giant red dragon, roaring at the sky, and the dragon energy in the air became even more intense. Roar, roar, roar. At this moment, the army of Doomsday Devourers below instantly became berserk, and they let out ear-piercing roars. Then, they madly rushed towards Nyation, forming a dense black mass. Hwah! Hwah! Seeing this, two pairs of cold demon wings appeared on Emo's back, and a terrifying cold aura soared into the sky. The surrounding void actually condensed into frost. The army of Doomsday Devourers madly rushed over, their eyes red as they stared at Nyation. Although they were very afraid of the cold aura, the attraction of the dragon energy was clearly more attractive. Boom, boom, boom. When the army of Doomsday Devourers rushed over, Emo stretched out his hand, and streams of cold aura surged out. Suddenly, a sky full of sharp icicles appeared in the sky, each of them tens of meters long, like a rain of arrows, pressing towards the army of Doomsday Devourers. Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, endless muffled sounds came from the sky, and countless Doomsday Devourers were bombarded by the icicles. Most of these Doomsday Devourers were human-level devourers, but there were also many Earth-level devourers who actually broke through the countless icicles and rushed straight towards Nyation and EMO. Chapter 3055. The formations I has appeared rumble. Beneath the ground, terrifying rumbling sounds were heard incessantly. The ground was constantly being lifted up, and large areas of the ground were cracking. Up in the sky, Nyation could not help but tremble as he watched the scene below. It was not fear that was revealed, but passion. He knew that the formation I devour was about to come out. Roar, roar, roar. However, at this moment, more than a dozen Earth-ranked devourers appeared. Their bodies were covered in incomparably violent, devouring flames, and they released a terrifying, devouring aura as they pounced towards Nyation. Those Doomsday Devourers certainly had a special preference for Dragon Chi. Many of them could not help but devour the Dragon Chi in the air, their eyes bloodshot and fanatical. Get out of my way, you beast! EMO frowned, and the frigid fiend demon wings on his back fluttered wildly. His entire body spun in the air. The frigid fiend demon wings released frigid fiend chi that condensed into sharp blades. Asterisk, the streaks of frost chi actually broke through the protective formation around the Doomsday Devourers and shot right into their bodies. Asterisk, bang, bang, bang. Asterisk, then, the frost chi exploded within the bodies of the Doomsday Devourers, and more than a dozen of them burst in a bloody light in the air. It was an extremely tragic sight. Impressive. Nyation's eyes trembled at the sight. Emo's frost chi was simply too powerful against the Doomsday Devourers. It was truly unbelievable that EMO, a demi-saint, could kill a dozen Earth-class devourers in the blink of an eye with his strength. It was then that Emo's figure actually moved. He flew across the air and returned to Nyation's side. holding a dozen Devourer's Heartstones in his hand. While this fellow was slaughtering, he did not forget to collect the Heartstones to increase his points. Asterisk boom. Asterisk, it was then that a terrifying rumble suddenly rang out from the ground. A part of the ground crumbled as a sharp claw burning with devouring flames reached out from the ground. Huh? Nation could not help but tremble at the sight, his eyes revealing a look of shock. The sharp claws that extended from the ground were actually more than 10 meters long. Judging from the sharp claws, the giant beast underground was at least a few hundred meters long. This discovery made Nation involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. The heaven-ranked devourers he had seen before were only about 100 meters long. The fellow underground was actually several times larger than a heaven devourer. Without a doubt, this behemoth was the array devourer. The battle prowess of a heaven devourer was already close to that of a pseudo-sage pinnacle human powerhouse. Just how terrifying would the battle prowess of this devourer be? Thinking of this, Nation's gaze couldn't help but tremble. He had originally thought that even if the devourer was stronger than a heaven devourer, it wouldn't be by much. It seemed that he was wrong. Based on a preliminary estimate, the strength of the formation devourer was definitely equivalent to a human saint-state expert. Bang! Bang! But at this moment, the ground cracked open again as another sharp claw appeared, after which a gigantic head appeared. It was incomparably pitch black. It was burning with intense, devouring flames. The formation devourer. Nation's eyes trembled, and he was pleasantly surprised. Boom! As soon as his voice fell, a large area of the ground suddenly collapsed, and then a huge figure that was at least 500 meters tall broke out of the formation. The ground shook, and the void was almost torn apart under the pressure of the huge force. This! Nation's eyes narrowed, and he was shocked. He had never thought that the formation devourer would be so terrifying. Even though he was tens of thousands of meters away, he could still feel the powerful, devouring aura of the formation devourer. This is the formation devourer? Emo looked down, and he was also shocked, and he exclaimed. Previously, when Nation told him about the formation devourer, he thought that it was just a devourer that was slightly larger than a heaven devourer. He did not expect that the formation devourer would be so terrifying. Nation, you must get within 10,000 meters of the formation devourer, or the 4 God Soul Stones will not be able to record its divine soul aura. At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded, and she said nervously, "Yes." Nation nodded heavily, and immediately calmed down a lot. Of course, it was impossible for him to have a head-on conflict with the formation devourer now, and he only needed to record the divine soul aura of the formation devourer. The next moment, he moved his mind, and the dragon chi around him disappeared. Since the formation devourer had been lured out, there was no need to release the dragon chi anymore. "Emo, cover me. I want to get close to that big guy." Nation looked at Emo and shouted loudly. "Yes." Emo did not say much, but just nodded heavily. Immediately after, Nation held the 4 God Soul Stones in his hand, and astral soul wings appeared on his back. His figure was like a shocking rainbow, and he directly swooped down towards the formation devourer. Boom, boom, boom. At this time, the surrounding Doomsday Devourers moved in unison, and they madly rushed towards Nation. "All of you, get out of my way!" Seeing this, Emo let out a loud roar. The baleful frost chi around his body became extremely violent. The 2 pairs of baleful frost demon wings on his back moved at the same time. Suddenly, baleful frost chi surged out like a stormy sea and pressed down on the ground. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. Wherever the cold chi passed, the space was directly frozen, and countless figures of the Doomsday Devourers were frozen in the air. Seeing this scene, the corner of Nation's mouth twitched slightly, and the wings on his back flapped, and his speed suddenly increased. In the blink of an eye, he rushed out of the encirclement of the Doomsday Devourer army, and arrived in the air less than 10,000 meters away from the formation devourer. At this moment, he could clearly see the appearance of the formation devourer. Not only was the formation I devour much larger than a heaven-ranked devourer, but its appearance was also different from ordinary devourers. The formation I devourer's body was more robust, and it no longer looked like a wolf, but more like a giant tiger. Moreover, its head was very large, almost occupying a third of its entire body. And at this time, the formation I devourer seemed to have sensed something, and its eyes abruptly opened. Its blood-red pupils emitted a bone-piercing, cold light. Perhaps it was because the formation I devour had not opened its eyes for a long time, but the instant its blood-red eyes opened, they were like two devouring abysses, directly swallowing people. In that instant, Tion felt his divine sense trembling, and he almost lost control of his divine soul. Fortunately, his divine sense was strong, and he quickly reacted. Roar! And at this time, the formation I devour let out a low roar, and it was incomparably violent. Following which, it waved its huge claws, and in an instant, a flaming blade broke through the air, and the aura was extremely sharp, and it attacked Tion. In an instant, Tion felt an incomparably real aura of death descend. The formation I devour's battle strength was definitely comparable to a human sage expert. Just from the aura alone, the formation I devour was even stronger than the heaven's chosen saint envoy. Chapter 3056. Taking advantage of one's precarious situation, swoosh. The flaming blade tore through the air, tearing the space in its path. High up in the sky, Emo's heart tightened as he saw this scene, and he shouted, Tion, watch out. Tion's eyes narrowed, and he quickly reacted. The wings on his back shook, and as he dodged to the side, he flew up into the sky. Whoosh! He was fast, but the flaming blade was even faster. In an instant, it tore through the air, and time and space collapsed. A scorching, devouring aura shrouded over and spread in the void. Hiss! Tion sucked in a breath of cold air. He could no longer dodge the flaming blade's attack. At the moment of life and death, he instantly made choice. The astral soul shield and the heavenly water armor appeared around his body at the same time. At the same time, 9 bone-eroding soul shackling chains suddenly stretched out, and with a slight push, his figure moved several meters away. Whoosh! At this moment, the flaming blade swept through the air, almost brushing past Tion's chest. Tion successfully avoided the flaming blade, but the remaining power of the flames affected him, leaving a huge wound on his chest that was so deep that bones could be seen. Blood gushed out and instantly dyed his entire body red. Boom! Then, the terrifying, devouring aura rushed into his body like a raging wave, crashing into his body. He endured the pain, flapped the wings on his back, and shot back. Roar, roar, roar. At this moment, the Doomsday Devourer army in the sky swarmed over, directly blocking Tion's path of retreat. Get out of my way. At the same time, a deep roar sounded, and a huge cold ice all appeared in the sky, pressing down on the void. Rumble. Bang, bang, bang. In the next instant, the cold ice all fell, directly dispersing the Doomsday Devourer army. Tion looked up, and his figure moved quickly and nimbly, rushing out through a small gap. Tion, are you okay? Emo's figure arrived, and he saw the wound on Tion's chest, and asked anxiously. I'm fine, Tion agreed. The 9 dragon veins in his body circulated crazily, forcing the devouring flames out of his body. At this moment, the wound on his chest began to heal slowly. Emo protected Tion as the two of them flew up into the sky, quickly shaking off the Doomsday Devourer army. The formation Core Devourer below stared at Tion with its blood-red eyes. However, it did not chase after him. After staring at him for a long time, its massive body once again burrowed into the ground. After a long time, the Doomsday Devourer army also gradually dispersed. Emo, it's all thanks to you. High up in the sky, Xiao Chun took a deep breath. Although his face was still somewhat pale, the wound on his chest had already healed completely. We are friends. Emo faintly smiled as he replied. Nyetian nodded and did not say anything else. Although he almost lost his life in awakening the formation core devourer this time, Nyetian was still very happy. He had successfully recorded the spirit aura of the formation core devourer on the 4 god soul stones. In other words, he could now use the 4 god soul stones to constantly know the location of the formation core devourer. Next, Nyetian did not follow the formation core devourer. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the ground and took a good rest to recover his strength. Yulaw was frozen by EMO and would not be in any danger for the time being, so Nyetian was not in a hurry. About a few hours later, Nyetian's condition had mostly recovered, and he stood up again. Nyetian, what do we do next? EMO looked at Nyetian and asked. Look for someone. Nyetian nodded slightly, and then he sensed the 4 gods' soul stones again, trying to find Rui Chinyu. But to his disappointment, Cher and Rui Chinyu's auras still did not appear. It seems that there is no other way. We can only search slowly. Nyetian sighed, and the worry on his face became more intense. Why was it that he knew the auras of the others, but he could not find the auras of Cher and Rui Chinyu? At this time, Nyetian's eyes suddenly darkened, and his expression changed. He sensed a familiar spirit aura on the 4 gods' soul stones. It was only tens of thousands of meters away from them. It's Ingyu from Jueying Temple. His eyes darkened, and his divine sense locked onto the spirit aura. Ingyu was a warrior from Jueying Temple. Before the divine choice's end had begun, he had wanted to provoke Nyetan, but he had been humiliated by the Rakshasa, holy maiden, who had suddenly appeared. Nyetan remembered that Ingyu had also set foot on the 3 trials of black and yellow, and had tried to destroy Nyetian's tree of black and yellow. Although Ingyu had been affected by the divine choice platform at the time, it at least showed that he wanted to kill Nyetian. Otherwise, he would not have been affected by the divine choice platform. Let's meet this guy. Nyetian thought for a moment, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. His figure moved, and he flew directly towards where Ingyu was. Anyway, it would not be easy to find Rui Chinyu now, so he might as well meet this guy from Jueying Temple. Maybe he could get some unexpected information. After a while, Nyetian and EMO arrived and landed directly on a huge 3-sunwood. In the open space below, a figure was sitting cross-legged. He seemed to have suffered a serious injury and was recovering. Hey, Ingyu from Jueying Temple, long time no see, Nyetian shouted as he looked at the figure. Ingyu was in a state of cultivation when he was suddenly alarmed. His body trembled, and he stood up. He suddenly turned around and saw Nyetian and EMO. His eyes suddenly turned cold, and he said darkly, Nyetian, it's you. It's me. Are you surprised? Nyetian smiled faintly, and his figure moved as he landed. EMO was still standing on the tree, not moving an inch. He believed that with Nyetian's strength, it was more than enough to deal with Ingyu. Ingyu felt the killing intent in Nyetian's eyes. He was stunned at first, and then he sneered, Brat, you think you can kill me? I'll kill you like a dog. Nyetian laughed, and the killing intent in his eyes suddenly became stronger. Ingyu had only set foot on the 3 trials of black and yellow, and had just condensed the seed of black and yellow. He hadn't even grown the tree of black and yellow. Therefore, Ingyu's strength was only at the 3rd rank false sacred realm. Not to mention that Ingyu was injured. Even if he was in peak condition, Nyetian wouldn't take him seriously. Courting death, Ingyu's eyes darkened, and then he growled. His eyes turned cold, and he took a step forward and attacked. It was obvious that he wanted to catch Nyetian off guard and gain the upper hand. Boom! Ingyu's figure moved, and he threw out a palm. Suddenly, a violent palm force rolled out and pressed down on Nyetian. You're the one who's courting death. Facing the sudden palm, Nyetian sneered and directly took a step forward. His body shook, and a sword shadow whistled out, directly smashing the palm shadow in the air. Bang! Immediately, there was a muffled sound in the air, and Ingyu was directly sent flying, leaving a bloody mark on the ground. Nyetian, Ingyu struggled on the ground, trying to stand up, but he couldn't. He was seriously injured to begin with, Otherwise, he wouldn't have been seriously injured when Nie Tian hadn't used his sword. What about me? Nie Tianling laughed, and step by step, the killing intent in his eyes sharpened with every step he took. Taking advantage of others' difficulties, what kind of ability is that? Ingyu was very stubborn, and he shouted wildly, I don't have any ability as long as I can kill you. Nie Tian smiled cold, and he was already less than 5 meters away from Ingyu. Chapter 3057 Vanishing Shadow Mark HM Ingyu's words rang in Nie Tian's ears like thunder, causing his pupils to shrink. He took a step forward and roared, What did you say? Ha ha ha. Ingyu laughed wildly when he saw Nie Tian's reaction. It seems you still don't know. Your woman is Rui Qinyu, the one with the 9-colored pupils. When she was on the Heaven's Choice platform, Shadowfire Ruinous Star left a vanishing shadow mark on her. I'm afraid she's already been killed by Shadowfire Ruinous Star. What? Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He roared like a wild beast, but it was as if he'd been struck by lightning. His body swayed, and he took a few steps back. Nie Tian. EMO stepped forward and supported Nie Tian. I'm fine. Nie Tian's eyes were a little stiff, and he looked a little dazed. It took him a long time to recover. He waved his hand and forced himself to calm down. He stepped forward, his killing intent pressing down on Ingyu. What do you want? Ingyu's entire body was wrapped in a terrifying killing intent, as if a giant invisible hand was gripping him. He couldn't even breathe. He looked at Nie Tian, his voice trembling. What you just said, is it true? Nie Tian's eyes were as fierce as a wolf's as he asked. At this moment, every drop of blood in his body was boiling, trembling, and roaring. If Rui Qinyu really died at the hands of Shadowfire Ruinous Star, he would definitely exterminate the entire Shadow Temple and kill every single person there. Yes, it's true. Ingyu couldn't help but panic when he felt Nie Tian's anger and killing intent. I'm asking if Rui Qinyu is still alive. Nie Tian's eyes were cold and murderous. Every word he spoke was filled with a bone-chilling coldness. I don't know. Ingyu was truly afraid. His lips trembled as he said, I only know that Shadowfire Army Breaker left a vanishing shadow mark on Rui Qinyu. I don't know anything else. Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he stared at Ingyu, not speaking for a long time. What you said should be true. Under such circumstances, he did not dare to lie. During the Heaven's Chosen Tao platform's test, Rui Qinyu had fought with Shadowfire Ruiner in order to protect Nie Tian's Tree of Heaven and Yellow. Shadow Flame Destroyer should have left the vanishing shadow mark on Rui Qinyu at that time. The absolute shadow mark should be some kind of soul mark used to track martial artists. Previously, Fifth Thunder had said that Shadowfire Ruinous Star had left a vanishing shadow imprint on Jiangyin, Tung Hua, and the others in order to obtain the 4 Wonder Soul Stones. It was precisely because of the existence of the vanishing shadow mark that Fifth Thunder could find Jiang, In, and Tung Hua. Nie Tian had been unable to sense Rui Qinyu's soul aura all this time, which made him very uneasy. Now that Ingyu told him this, it made him even more agitated. Did something really happen to Rui Qinyu? Nie Tian, calm down. I believe that with Miss Ryu's strength, even that Shadowfire Ruinous Star might not be her match. At this time, EMO frowned slightly and came to Nie Tian's side. He did not know how to comfort people, so his tone was very stiff. I'm fine. Nie Tian forced himself to calm down and said in a low voice. He knew that at this time, the more flustered he was, the more trouble he would be in. He had to calm down and find Rui Qinyu as soon as possible. Following that, he took out the 4 Wonder Soul Stones and tried to sense Shadowfire Ruinous Star's soul aura. But to his surprise, he actually could not sense it. Could it be that Shadowfire Ruinous Star and the others are too far away from me? Then he turned to Ingyu and asked with a frosty look in his eyes, What on earth is the Death Shadow Seal? Seeing that Nie Tian had become much colder, Ingyu raised his eyebrows and said, I don't know. You don't know? Then I'll help you think. Nie Tianling laughed, and then the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. His figure moved, and a bone-eroding soul shackling chain suddenly appeared. Pooh! The next moment, The bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain, like a long snake, directly pierced through Yu's shoulder. Streams of bone-eroding, soul-shackling chi seeped into his body. Suddenly, Yu could not bear the sharp pain and let out a heart-wrenching scream. Now do you know? Nie Tianling said coldly. The bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain moved, and suddenly Yu felt as if his body and soul were about to be torn apart. He directly screamed at the top of his lungs. Nie Tian's eyes were as cold as ice. He slightly relaxed the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain, and the corners of his mouth twitched as he squeezed out a word. Speak. I'll speak. I'll speak. I'll speak. Yu felt the sharp pain weaken, and he finally relaxed a little. His eyes trembled as he looked at Nie Tian, as if he were looking at a demon. In fact, the pain he had suffered was nothing at all. When Nie Tian had fused with the 9-bone, eroding, soul-shackling chains, the pain he had suffered was much greater than Yu's. The Vanishing Shadow Mark is a special soul-marking technique of the Vanishing Shadow Shrine. It leaves a trace of vanishing shadow chi in a martial artist's body. Within a certain range, the Vanishing Shadow Mark can be perceived to determine the location of the marked person. After a moment, Yu honestly explained the Vanishing Shadow Mark. How wide is the Vanishing Shadow Mark's perception range? Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he asked in a cold voice. I'm not sure. The stronger the Vanishing Shadow Mark's creator is, the wider its perception range is. Yu didn't dare hide anything. Because the Vanishing Shadow Mark was left behind by Shadow Fire Ruinous Star, our mark's perception is very weak. We can only sense the existence of the Vanishing Shadow Mark within 500 miles. The range of Shadow Fire Ruinous Star's perception should be around a few thousand miles. Nie Tian frowned slightly, and his face darkened. He thought for a moment, then asked, Does everyone in the Vanishing Shadow Shrine have a Vanishing Shadow Mark? Yes. Yu nodded, then said, The Vanishing Shadow Mark's ability to sense each other is very weak. I can't sense Shadow Fire Ruinous Star and the others. Is that so? Nie Tianling laughed, then asked, What other functions does the Vanishing Shadow Mark have, besides marking the soul? Other functions? Yu froze for a moment, then seemed to understand something. He looked at the 4 God Spirit Stones in Nie Tian's hand and asked, Are those the 4 God Spirit Stones in your hand? Yes. Nie Tian nodded, waiting for Yu to continue. So these are the 4 God Spirit Stones. Yu looked at the 4 God Spirit Stones in surprise. Then, a strange light flashed in his eyes as he asked, You can't sense Shadow Fire Ruinous Star's aura on the 4 God Spirit Stones, right? Yes. Nie Tian nodded again. It seems that the Vanishing Shadow Mark has counteracted the 4 God Spirit Stones' perception. Yu frowned, then said, The Vanishing Shadow Mark in Shadow Fire Ruinous Star's body is very strong. It's not surprising that it can counteract the 4 God Spirit Stones' perception. That's really the case. Nie Tian frowned, and his expression turned gloomy. In fact, he had already guessed that the reason he couldn't sense Shadow Fire Ruinous Star's soul aura was related to the Vanishing Shadow Mark. Yu had been very close to him, and the Vanishing Shadow Mark in his body wasn't very strong, so he had been able to sense it. Chapter 3058. Enraged, Nie Tian Rui Qianyu's Vanishing Shadow Mark had been left behind by a Shadow Fire Ruinous Star. Of all the heavens chosen in the Vanishing Shadow Shrine, only Shadow Fire Ruinous Star had the strength to threaten Rui Qianyu. So Nie Tian had to find Shadow Fire Ruinous Star. At that moment, Nie Tian's eyes grew cold as he looked at Yu and asked coldly, Do you have a way to find Shadow Flame Ruiner? No. Yu felt the murderous intent in Nie Tian's eyes grow stronger. He was so frightened that his face stiffened and his voice trembled. If you can't find Shadow Fire Ruinous Star, then there's no point in your existence. Nie Tianling smiled coldly and stepped forward. Suddenly, a suffocating killing intent surged out and enveloped Yu. In an instant, Yu felt like he was about to suffocate. At this time, as long as Nie Tian willed it, he could easily kill Yu. I'll ask you one last time. Can you find Shadow Fire Ruinous Star? Nyetian asked, his eyes as cold as ice. His murderous intent was on the verge of bursting out. Inyu's face froze. Chaos was spinning rapidly, and he was too frightened to speak. Looks like you can't. Nyetian's mouth twitched as he slowly raised his hand. Yes, I can. I can find Shadowfire Ruinous Star. Inyu's face was ashen. His eyes flashed as he shouted. It seems that death can really push a person to their limits. Nyetian's palm stopped in midair. His eyes were as cold as 10,000-year-old ice as he said, Speak. I need to use the 4 god soul stones to find Shadowfire Ruinous Star. Inyu felt his mouth go dry. He gulped and pointed at the 4 god soul stones in Nyetian's hand. All right. Nyetian's mouth twitched. He threw the 4 god soul stones to Inyu and sneered. You'd better find Shadowfire Ruinous Star, or you're dead. Yes. Inyu received the 4 wonder god soul stones and carefully nodded. He then carefully sensed the 4 wonder god soul stones and dripped a drop of blood on the 4 wonder god soul stones, which were instantly absorbed. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly. He could feel that the aura within the 4 spirit stones seemed to have changed. Inyu focused all of his attention on the 4 divine soul stones, not daring to be careless. Beads of sweat soon appeared on his face. Found it. After a while, he suddenly shouted in surprise. His divine sense was firmly locked on a divine soul aura in the soul stone. Using his own absolute shadow seal as a guide, he stimulated the reaction of the 4 spirit stones to the absolute shadow seal. This kid is quite smart. Fat Cat could not help but say as she saw the clues. Where is it? Nyetian's eyes were blazing as he hurriedly asked. It's about 2,000 kilometers away from us. Inyu nodded, tightly gripping the 4 divine soul stones, fearing that Nyetian would take them back. He knew that if Nyetian knew the location of Shadowfire Ruinous Star, he would no longer be needed. Take me there. Nyetian did not take back the 4 wonder god soul stones, but said in a deep voice. Inyu nodded heavily, but his expression was a little ugly. He was now seriously injured, and it was difficult for him to fly by himself. Nyetian directly called out Jinban from the 9 superbs, letting you sit on Jinban, and then the group began to move in the direction of Shadowfire Ruinous Star. Chinya, don't let anything happen to you. Nyetian prayed in his heart, but the uneasiness in his heart grew stronger. Inyu secretly looked at Nyetian, his eyes filled with panic. He had just sensed Shadowfire Ruinous Star's divine soul aura on the 4 wonder god soul, but he did not sense Rui Qianyu's divine soul aura. Rui Qianyu's vanishing shadow mark was left behind by a Shadowfire Ruinous Star, so he should have been able to sense it. At this time, Inyu had a bad guess in his heart. Rui Qianyu had most likely died at Shadowfire Ruinous Star's hands. Of course, he did not dare to tell Nyetian this guess. Even a fool could see how important Rui Qianyu was in Nyetian's heart. If Rui Qianyu really died, Nyetian would probably lose control of his anger. A few hours later, Nyetian and the others arrived at the edge of the Doomsday Jungle. The devouring flame aura here was even stronger than the inside. The 3 sun trees were burning with devouring flame, spitting tongues of fire as if they wanted to burn everything. It's just ahead. We're almost there. At this time, Inyu looked at Nyetian, clearly very panicked. He was trying to figure out a way to escape Nyetian's control. A moment later, Nyetian and the others arrived outside a long and narrow valley. Shadowfire Ruinous Star is in this valley, Inyu said solemnly as he pointed at the valley ahead. Chinyu. Nyetian looked at the valley, and his eyes suddenly trembled. He could sense the aura of the 9 colored pupils. Rui Chinyu had indeed fallen into Shadowfire Ruinous Star's hands. In the next moment, Nyetian felt that the 9 colored pupils' power seemed to be very unstable, and his expression involuntarily changed. His figure immediately moved, and he directly flew towards the valley. In the blink of an eye, his figure appeared in the air above the entrance of the valley, and the scene that greeted his eyes made his whole body stiffen. In the air above the valley, a series of iron chains stretched horizontally like long snakes, and strange runes flowed on the iron chains like countless maggots, constantly crawling on the iron chains, releasing an extremely evil and violent aura. At the place where the chains converged was a badly mutilated figure. The iron chains pierced through the body, and the evil runes were continuously seeping into the body. It was a badly mutilated figure, and its face was also badly mutilated. Beneath the scabs were extremely delicate facial features. Chinyu. Nietian looked at this figure, and his eyes trembled as he finally called out her name. This figure was Rui Chinyu. Nia. At this time, Rui Chinyu actually raised her head slightly and opened her mouth with difficulty. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't call out a complete name. And at this moment, Nietian saw the most terrifying scene. On Rui Chinyu's face, where her eyes should have been, there were actually 2 bloody holes. Her 9-colored pupils had been dug out by someone. Son of a B*TCH. In the blink of an eye, Nietian's eyes turned bloodshot. Every drop of his blood, every inch of his bones, and every meridian in his body started to tremble and roar, as if they were going against the flow of energy. At this moment, he was like a volcano that had suddenly erupted. It's you. At this time, several figures suddenly appeared in the valley. When they saw Nietian, they were first stunned, then immediately shouted out. Nietian knew all of these people. They were all warriors of Jueying Temple. They were the ones who had taken away Rui Qianyu's eyes and used such a cruel method to torture her. Nietian, you actually came here. Are you here to die? We didn't look for you, but you came to us. You're dead today. Everyone, let's kill this boy and take the Star Origin Stone in his body. A few of the Jueying Temple martial artists smiled coldly as they approached step by step. Nietian was only a level 5 demi-saint, and the weakest among them was a level 1 demi-saint. Of course, they didn't take Nietian seriously. You deserve to die. At this moment, Nietian's eyes were cold and murderous. His blood was boiling, and he looked like a demon that had just walked out of hell. Chapter 3059. Berserk as a beast, one of Nietian's demonic eyes had turned pitch black, while the other, heavenly punishment godly eye, was blood red. In his rage, his other bloodline eyes were in a strange state. The power of his demonic eyes was soaring, but it was not released, instead fusing with the blood of his entire body. It's the body of a demonic god awakening. Fat Cat suddenly realized something, and her eyes trembled as she cried out in shock. But Nietian was like a wild beast at that moment, and he did not hear what Fat Cat was saying at all. A mere demi-saint wants to kill us. At that moment, the people from the Jueying Divine Palace did not take Nietian seriously at all. One of them stepped forward and looked at Nietian mockingly. He was extremely arrogant. Die. But at that moment, the corner of Nietian's mouth twitched, and he uttered a single word coldly. His murderous intent soared to the extreme in an instant. The next moment, Nietian's figure moved as fast as lightning. He soared into the air, and the void around him trembled as if it was being torn apart. In the next moment, several illusory images of Nietian appeared in the void. His speed was so fast that he left a shadow in the air with each step he took. Then, an extremely horrifying scene appeared. Crash! The arrogant Jueying Temple martialist's body shook, and then he was torn in half in the air. Blood sprayed into the air like a curtain of blood. Nietian's figure appeared in the curtain of blood, his whole body bathed in crimson like a demon from hell. The other martialists of Jueying Temple saw this scene, and their laughter stopped abruptly. They all sucked in a breath of cold air, and their eyes glazed over. They could not believe their eyes at all. What had they just seen? Nietian had walked straight over and torn apart a pseudo-saint powerhouse with his bare hands, and his strength was only that of a demi-saint. Such a scene was something that no one could believe or accept. However, they saw it with their own eyes. Die. All of you die. At that moment, Nietian suddenly turned around. His eyes, filled with the aura of death, locked onto a few Jueying Temple warriors. In that instant, The warriors of the Juying shrine felt despair seep into their souls. In front of the beast-like Nietian, they did not have the slightest ability to resist. You want to... The next moment, a Juying temple warrior saw several shadows appear in front of him. He wanted to say something, but before he could finish, his entire body was split in two in the air. Whoosh! Wah! Whoosh! Following that, numerous illusory figures appeared in the sky, and wherever the illusory figures passed, a screen of blood appeared. In the blink of an eye, 7 or 8 pseudo-saint martial artists were all killed. Nietian was like a ferocious beast, slaughtering everything. Nietian! Right at this moment, a cry of alarm suddenly sounded from outside the valley. Nietian's face darkened. The cry had come from Emo. His figure flashed, and he rushed out of the valley. In the air, a dozen figures stood coldly. The one leading them was the top genius of the Juying shrine, Shadowfire Ruinous Star. Emo stood trembling on the ground. His body was a bloody mess, and he was seriously injured. Jin Tu's huge body was covered with a dozen terrible gashes. He was actually on the verge of death. Nietian had been too focused on killing in the valley just now, and he had not noticed what had happened outside. Emo. Nietian moved to Emo's side. I'm fine, Emo said with difficulty, holding on to his last breath. Nietian nodded slightly. He opened the 9 extreme gates and sent Emo and Jin Tu inside. Then he stared at Shadowfire Ruinous Star and said cold, Shadowfire Ruinous Star, you stole Rui Qinyu's eyes. 9 color pupils are one of the 10 most powerful eyes in the world, Shadow Flame Ruinous Star said with a cold smile. Not to mention the fact that you've unlocked 9 of them. Who wouldn't be tempted by them? Disdain could be seen in his eyes as he looked at Nietian. Nietian's eyes grew grim as he uttered coldly, You're a dead man. Do you think you're qualified to be my opponent? Shadowfire Ruinous Star smiled cold. Then his body shook, and his aura surged, causing the void to tremble. 6th rank False Saint. Nietian looked at Shadowfire Ruinous Star and sensed his strength. Not only was there fear in his eyes, but there was also a strong murderous intent. Shadowfire Ruinous Star was already a 5th rank False Saint before he took the test on the Heaven's Chosen platform. It was not surprising that he had become a 6th rank False Saint after absorbing the power of the Yellow Seed. But even if he was a 6th rank False Saint, he would not be able to escape death today. Kill him. Shadowfire Ruinous Star did not make a move. Instead, he shouted to the people around him. He's just a 5th rank demi-saint. There's no need to. One of the martialists stepped forward and looked at Niet Tianling in disdain. But before he could finish, he stopped abruptly. His body had been cut in two and turned into a curtain of blood in the air. The other martialists of the Juying temple were completely stunned when they saw this. How could Nietian be so fast? How could his physical strength be so strong? Tearing apart a 1st rank False Saint with his 5th rank demi-saint strength, was this really not an illusion? All of you must die, Nietian said in a low voice, his eyes fierce and cold. Attack! Shadowfire Ruinous Star was stunned for a moment, but then he reacted and growled. Boom, boom, boom. Immediately, the martialists of the Juying temple attacked in unison. Waves of violent power howled out, crashing towards Nietian like a raging wave. Nietian stood coldly in the air. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, he was filled with murderous intent. The next moment, he moved. He took a step forward, and with each step he took, a shadow appeared in the air. Boom, boom, boom. At this time, Nietian was like the craziest of beasts. He ignored everything and used his martial body to resist all the attacks. His figure was like a sharp blade, piercing through all the violent attacks. In an instant, he was in front of the people of the Juying temple. Die! With a violent voice, Nietian moved like lightning. He stepped in front of a martialist of the Juying temple, stretched out his hand, and pressed down on the top of the man's head. With a sudden force, the man's skull was crushed. Then the next. Bang! 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 In the air, the sound of heads exploding could be heard. In a flash of blood, headless corpses appeared and fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen Jueying temple marshalists had died. The only survivor, Yin Pajuan, looked at Niet Tan with trembling eyes, as if he was looking at a monster. The scene in front of him was something that he had never expected. It was something that he could not imagine at all. Niet Tan only had the strength of a 5th-rank demi-saint. How could his physical strength be so strong that he could tear apart false saints? It seemed that false saints were like paper puppets in Niet Tan's hands. Chapter 3060. Demon Body. Shadowfire Ruinous Star's heart sank the moment Niet Tan locked onto him. He couldn't help but shudder. Niet Tan's battle prowess had far exceeded his expectations, especially the power of his martial body. It wasn't like a human's at all, but the strongest of beasts. Niet Tan, it seems that I've underestimated you. But the next moment, Shadowfire Ruinous Star calmed down a bit. He said in a low voice, "But I'm not like those trash. It's impossible for you to kill me." Is that so? The corner of Niet Tan's mouth twitched into a cold smile. His silhouette moved once more. He was fast to the extreme, leaving after-images in the air. Die. Shadowfire Ruinous Star wasn't afraid. With a roar, his silhouette suddenly moved, and he slapped down with his palm. The terrifying palm was like a mountain that pressed down on Niet Tan. But Niet Tan didn't care at all and charged forward. Bam! In the next instant, his body collided with the palm shadow head-on and actually broke through the palm shadow. But this collision caused Niet Tan's speed to decrease and his silhouette to stop. Blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. Humph! Shadowfire Ruinous Star saw that Niet Tan was injured and couldn't help but laugh coldly. He said, "And here I was wondering how strong your martial body was. It turns out that it's only SOSO. Not good. Niet Tan has used up too much of his eye power. The demon body can't hold on much longer." Fat Cat's voice rang out. He knew very well that the reason Niet Tan was so fierce and his martial body was so strong was because Niet Tan had unintentionally awakened the demon body in his rage. But the demon body's maintenance was completely dependent on the demonic eye and sky punishment god's eye power. And now, Niet Tan had used up too much of his eye power and could no longer maintain the demon body. Very soon, Niet Tan would lose his demon body. Once Niet Tan lost his demon body, he definitely wouldn't be Shadowfire Ruinous Star's opponent. At that moment, things would be bad. Niet Tan stabilized his body and could not help but frown. He felt that his martial body was rapidly weakening. Niet Tan, think a way to get close to him. At that moment, the Fat Cat's voice rang out anxiously. Yes. Niet Tan nodded his head. Of course, he wanted to get closer to Shadowflame Ruiner. Even if his martial body had weakened, it was still stronger than the Shadowflame Army Breaker. As long as he could get close to the Shadowflame Army Breaker, he could use the advantage of his martial body to instantly beat the latter into a pile of mush. Niet Tan, you're dead. At this moment, Shadowflame Ruiner also sensed that Niet Tan's martial body was rapidly weakening. He couldn't help but sneer and take the initiative to attack. Die! He roared in a low voice and struck out with his palm. His palm was as heavy as a mountain, causing the space around him to sink. His aura was like rumbling thunder, pressing down on Niet Tan. Niet Tan furrowed his brows as his lips curled into a cold smile. At this moment, the Starlight Heaven Slash appeared in his hands. Blood chi surged out from his body, fusing together with the sword in 10 around him. In the next instant, his silhouette soared up into the sky, his sword slashing through the heavens. A blood-colored sword shadow over 10,000 meters long shot out like a raging dragon. Rumble! In the air, the blood-colored sword shadow collided with the terrifying palm shadow. The void trembled as the blood-colored sword shadow shattered. But at the same time, a crack appeared on the gigantic palm shadow. Now's the time. Niet Tan's gaze darkened as he stared at the crack. With a low roar, a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. His entire person was like a bolt of lightning as he dashed towards the palm shadow. Pooh! In the next instant, his silhouette was like a sharp blade, directly piercing through the palm shadow as he dashed toward the Shadow Flame Army Breaker. This sudden scene caused the Shadow Flame Army Breaker's eyes to tremble as he exclaimed in surprise. He didn't expect that Nyetian would be so ferocious as to dare to rush towards him. Kill! At that moment, Nyetian, who was covered in blood, let out a furious roar like a wild beast. His entire body blurred into a streak of blood that shot towards the Shadow Flame Destroyer. Kill! 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 Thunderous roars reverberated in the air, causing the blood of those who heard it to boil. In the blink of an eye, Nyetian arrived before the Shadow Flame Army Breaker and punched out. The Shadow Flame Army Breaker was, after all, a 6th-ranked pseudo-sage expert. His eyes trembled as a ferocious aura surged out, and he also punched out. Bang! Following which, the two fists collided, and the sound of metal colliding resounded in the air. Crack, crack, crack. Almost at the same time, the sound of bones breaking rang out. The Shadow Flame Army Breaker's figure was directly flung back 100 meters. After he stabilized himself, he lowered his head to look at his fist, only to see that it was a bloody mess. The Shadow Flame Army Breaker was so shocked that he almost howled. He had never imagined that the gap between their martial physiques would be so great in a head-on clash with Nyetian. He was a 6th-ranked pseudo-sage, while Nyetian was only a 5th-ranked demi-saint. How could Nyetian's martial physique be so monstrous? Nyetian is now in the god-demon body state. Even if it's a half-crippled god-demon body awakened under special circumstances, it's still not something a 6th-ranked pseudo-sage can fight against. Fat Cat snorted cold. In his eyes, the Shadow Flame Army Breaker was already a corpse, and he would die a horrible death at that. At this moment, the Shadow Flame Army Breaker had just stabilized himself when Nyetian's figure appeared again, right in front of his face. Nyetian had already seized the opportunity, and there was no way he would give the Shadow Flame Army Breaker any chance to breathe. Boom! In the next moment, Nyetian's fist smashed out, and the air exploded. Bang! The Shadow Flame Army Breaker raised his arm to block, and the moment the fist landed, there was a dull sound in the air, followed by the sound of bones breaking. The Shadow Flame Army Breaker was sent flying, and one of his arms was directly broken. The flesh and bone where it was severed were a mess. Nyetian's martial physique was simply too frightening, and the Shadow Flame Army Breaker was no match for it. Damn it! The Shadow Flame Army Breaker cursed, and the Yuan meridians in his body churned wildly as he tried to attack again. But how could Nyetian give him such a chance? Nyetian's figure arrived in front of the Shadow Flame Army Breaker in the blink of an eye, and he actually grabbed the Shadow Flame Army Breaker by his collar and lifted him up. You? The Shadow Flame Army Breaker's eyes trembled, and he was utterly shocked. Nyetian did not say a word, and his only response was a heavy punch. Bang! The punch landed solidly on the Shadow Flame Army Breaker's face. At once, the Shadow Flame Army Breaker's face caved in, his facial features contorted, and his eyes, nose, and teeth were all squeezed together. Don't kill! At that moment, the Shadow Flame Army Breaker was still conscious, and his sunken eyes trembled as he tried to beg for mercy. Unfortunately, he did not even have the chance to finish his words. Bang! 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 Nyetian did not pause at all, and simply punched the Shadow Flame Army Breaker's face again and again. It was a scene that was hard to imagine. It was a fight between a demi-saint and a pseudo-saint, and it was basically a brawl between mortals. And yet, the power behind each of Nyetian's punches was unimaginably frightening. Chapter 3061. Let me do it high up in the sky. Nyetian sensed that Shadow Flame Ruinous Star had lost all signs of life, so he stopped. The body in his hand had turned into a headless corpse. At this time, Nyetian felt that his martial body was slowly returning to its normal state. He was much calmer now, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He felt that what had just happened was inconceivable. Of course, he didn't know that he had unintentionally awakened the godly demon body. He didn't even hear Fat Cat's words. In a state of near insanity, he had killed dozens of Jueying Temple's heaven's chosen ones. Chinya. At this time, Nietian immediately reacted. With a cry, his figure moved, and he appeared in the valley. These beasts! Seeing the scene in front of him again, he still couldn't calm down and roared. Nietian, calm down. At this time, Fat Cat's voice rang out, and a figure appeared. Nietian nodded slightly, suppressing the anger in his heart. He began to observe Rui Qianyu's condition. Rui Qianyu had already fainted, and only her last breath was left. Nietian, take a look at Jin 2 and the Wing Clan boy's condition first. Leave Ruoyu to me, Fat Cat said, worried that Nietian would be rash. Nietian agreed, then entered the 9 extremities. He carefully observed Jin 2's condition. His injuries were serious, but not life-threatening. He would recover after a few months of rest. Emo's condition was similar, and he needed a rest. But Emo had lost the ability to fight, which worried Nietian. Emo was a great weapon against the Doomsday Devourer. Nietian came out of the 9 extremities. Seeing that Fat Cat was still observing and not doing anything, he couldn't help but feel anxious. He asked, Fat, how is Chinya? Very troublesome. The Fat Cat spoke in a deep voice. Look at these 18 chains. Each of them is pierced through Rui Qianyu's body. Furthermore, these chains are engraved with terrifying runes. It was these runes that forced Rui Qianyu's eyes out. In the process, Rui Qianyu must have suffered unimaginable pain. After these fellows took off her rainbow pupil, they didn't kill her directly. Instead, they continued to let these curse seals into her body. They clearly want to torture her to death. These animals! Nietian roared angrily when he heard what Fat Cat had said. His eyes trembled violently. Nietian, calm down. Right now, saving people is the most important thing. Fat Cat looked at Nietian and said in a deep voice, Yes. Nietian nodded heavily and said with a gloomy expression, What should we do now? It's a little troublesome. The Fat Cat shook its head and said, Ruoyu's aura is very weak. You can say that it's the power of these curse seals that is keeping her alive. If we directly cut these chains, it will kill her. Someone must first absorb these curse seals for her before we can cut the chains. I'll do it, Nietian said without hesitation. I'm afraid you can't. The little Fat Cat glanced at Nietian and said, The aura of these magical symbols is incompatible with the bone-corroding soul refining rope inside of you. If you absorb them, the 2 types of magical symbols will clash with each other. If you absorb these curse seals, it will directly kill you. There's no time. I can only absorb the power of the curse seals. Nietian frowned and said in a heavy tone. There were only 4 people by his side now. Emo, Jiang-in, Tung Hua, and Xiaoya. Even if they were willing to absorb the curse seals, it was likely that none of them had the ability to do it. At this time, only Nietian had the ability to do it. However, at this time, the Fat Cat looked at Nietian and suddenly asked, Nietian, you don't want Rui Qianyu's eyes to be 2 black holes forever, do you? Of course not. Nietian's eyes darkened as he blurted out. Then don't think about absorbing the curse seals for her, because after saving her, you have more important things to do, the Fat Cat said in a deep voice. I have to activate the Saint Rune's 9-color pupils for Ruyu. Saint Rune's 9-color pupils? Nietian's face stiffened. He was stunned for a moment, not knowing what the Fat Cat was talking about. Rui Qianyu's 9-color pupils being dug out is a huge blow to her, but it's also a great opportunity. The Fat Cat looked at Rui Qianyu with a strange glint in its eyes. Among the 10 connate special pupils, the 9 pupils and 9-color pupils have the greatest potential. The ultimate power of the 9-color pupils doesn't end with the activation of all 9 pupils. Each pupil power of the 9-color pupils corresponds to one of the 9 elements. Therefore, a 9-color pupil martial artist can absorb any power from the 9 elements. The Heaven and Earth Saint Rune is a type of power that combines the 9 elements. Although Rui Qianyu's 9-color pupils have been dug out, her pupil roots are still there. As long as Rui Qianyu's pupil roots can absorb the Heaven and Earth Saint Rune, her 9-color pupils can be reconstructed and become the Saint Rune's 9-color pupils. Nietian's eyes trembled when he heard this. He was stunned. He didn't expect that the fat cat was actually thinking of letting Rui Qinyu absorb the Heaven and Earth Saint rune. The Heaven and Earth Saint rune was enough to let a Yuan Meridian martial artist ascend to the Saint realm. Could the pupil roots of Rui Qinyu's 9-color pupils withstand such a strong power? Fat, the Heaven and Earth Saint rune in the Saint Vitality Bloodstone hasn't been unsealed yet. How can Qinya absorb it? Nietian asked with a frown. The Heaven and Earth Saint rune hadn't been unsealed yet. This was the biggest problem Nietian was facing. So you have no way out. You must unseal the Heaven and Earth Saint rune. The fat cat looked at Nietian and said heavily, "If you absorb the rune for Ru, even if you don't die, you will become a cripple. How can you unseal the Heaven and Earth Saint rune then?" Nietian was taken aback, unable to utter a word. But now, who else could absorb the rune for Rui Qinyu except him? Fat, how long can Qinya last in her current condition? Nietian looked at the fat cat and asked solemnly. If she's lucky, she can last for 3 days. The fat cat frowned slightly and looked solemn. 3 days? Nietian was stunned, and his expression was extremely ugly. Where could he find someone who could absorb the rune for Rui Qinyu in 3 days? Nietian, you must calm down at this time. The fat cat looked at Nietian and said heavily, "Calm down." At this moment, Nietian became agitated and growled. Qinya only has 3 days to live. If no one absorbs the runes for her, she'll die soon. How can I stay calm? I have a suitable candidate in mind, but she's not here right now. The fat cat frowned and sighed. Fat, I can't care so much. I'll absorb the rune for Qinya. Nietian was already anxious and said heavily, "You can't absorb the rune." The fat cat shouted in a low voice. It was obvious that she was angry. "If I don't absorb it, am I supposed to watch Qinya die?" Nietian roared furiously. "Let me do it." At this moment, a gentle and indifferent yet incomparably familiar voice rang out. A beautiful silhouette floated over. Chapter 3062. The root of anomalous pupil in the valley. Nietian was stunned when he saw Cher suddenly appear. It took him a long time to react. Shui-Er's unexpected appearance had greatly surprised him. Cher! Fat Cat looked at Cher and exclaimed. The ideal candidate for him to absorb the runes was none other than Snow. Cher's martial body was special. Not only did she have the 3 Lives Meridian, but she had also integrated with the heavenly law Sacred Heart. The curse runes in front of her would not cause any damage to her martial body. Instead, she would absorb them and transform them into her own power. Nietian, I'm late. Cher came to Nietian's side and saw Rui Qinyu in the valley. Her delicate face turned solemn. How did you find this place? Nietian snapped out of his daze and asked. Although the princess's tear has been removed from your body, you still have its aura on you. I sensed the aura of the princess's tear and came all the way here. Cher nodded slightly. So it's the princess's tear. Nietian suddenly realized. He immediately thought of something and took out the 4 strange soul stones. When he killed Yu just now, he had already taken the 4 strange soul stones. Strange. Nietian sensed the 4 strange soul stones, but he still couldn't sense Cher's aura. Perhaps Cher's divine soul is special. The 4 strange soul stones can't record the aura of her divine soul. Fat Cat glanced at Nietian and said lightly, Since Cher is here, let her start absorbing the curse runes. Nietian nodded heavily. The most important thing now was not to think about Cher's divine soul aura, but to save Rui Qinyu. Nietian looked at Rui Qinyu again, feeling as if his heart was being torn apart by a knife. I swear that one day, Nietian, will crush the Jueying Temple. Nietian's eyes darkened as he roared in his heart. He absolutely could not tolerate what the Jueying Shrine had done to Rui Qinyu. He and the Jueying Temple were absolutely irreconcilable. Then, Fat Cat told Cher about Rui Qinyu's situation and reminded Cher to be careful. The process of absorbing the runes had to be slow and gentle. Otherwise, it would trigger the runes in Rui Qinyu's body. Rui Qinyu was on the brink of death. Any slight injury could kill her. Cher nodded lightly. Her expression was indifferent, but her eyes were filled with extreme determination. She knew how dangerous the next step would be, so she couldn't afford to make the slightest mistake. Taking a deep breath, Cher walked to the center of the valley. She placed one hand on an iron chain and began to carefully absorb the runes on it. The instant Shue touched the lock, the runes and symbols on it immediately reacted and became lively. They began to move along the lock and converge on Shue's palm. Cher stood there, unmoving. She was as calm as water, without a ripple. After a while, Nietian saw black lines appear on Cher's entire palm. It was as if there were black maggots wriggling under her skin. The runes were being rapidly absorbed by Cher. As Cher absorbed the runes faster and faster, the black runes on the chain began to lessen. The evil and violent aura began to weaken. Very good. Fat Cat looked at Cher and nodded slightly. Shue's control of absorbing the runes was better than he had expected. It was indeed a wise choice to let Cher absorb the runes. Everything was calm after that. After a few hours, Cher had completely absorbed the runes on the 18 iron chains. Her face was a little dull. The runes were very powerful. Even though she had the meridians of 3 lives, it was impossible for her to integrate the power of the runes in a short period of time. Phew! Shue let out a long sigh after she finished absorbing the cursed seal runes. However, her expression was ugly. Cher, are you all right? Nietian quickly stepped forward and asked anxiously. I'm fine. Cher's lips curled up slightly, and she said softly, she'll be fine. She just needs to rest for a few days and integrate the runes. Then, she'll recover completely. Fat Cat nodded. Then, he looked at Rui Qinyu and said, the runes are gone. Let's start saving people. Okay. Nietian nodded. Then, he stepped forward and observed carefully. Then, he began to slowly release the power of the stars into the iron chains. Of course, he could not directly cut off the iron chains. He could only use the power of the stars to slowly melt them. Nietian was very careful. He did not dare to be careless. After a few hours, all 18 iron chains were melted. When the iron chains were melted, Rui Qinyu woke up. She wanted to call out Nietian's name. However, before she could say it, she fell into a coma again. Her body went limp and she was about to fall. Qinyu. Nietian moved and hugged Rui Qinyu. After they landed, he began to release the power of the Terra Source and slowly injected it into Rui Qinyu's body. After a long time, beads of sweat appeared on Nietian's forehead, but the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. With the help of the Terra Source, the bloody holes in Rui Qinyu's body slowly healed. However, her face was still as white as a sheet. Phew, she should be fine now. Nietian could feel that Rui Qinyu's breathing had stabilized. He let out a long breath. Nietian, who took Sister Rui's eyes? Cher walked over and looked at Rui Qinyu. She asked in a low voice. It was someone from the Vanishing Shadow Temple, Nietian replied. He couldn't help but clench his fists tightly. The Vanishing Shadow Temple. Cher frowned. Her gentle eyes were filled with a rare, cold, murderous intent. Cher had a quiet and pure nature. Her eyes were filled with murderous intent. It was clear how angry she was. Nietian looked at Shue and said in a deep voice, Shue, I'll make the Juying Divine Palace pay for what they did to Qinyu 1,000 times over. Nietian, we could talk about revenge later. Right now, the most important thing is to help Rui recover her 9-color pupils, Fat Cat said. Rui's eyes have been destroyed, but the roots of her pupils are still there. However, after losing her pupils, it won't take long for the roots to disappear. So you must reconstruct her 9-color pupils before the roots disappear. Nietian nodded. He looked at Fat Cat and asked, Fat, how long do I have? The roots of the pupils, as the name suggested, were the roots of the other pupils. The power of the other pupils was transformed from the energy that the roots absorbed from the outside world. The roots were not only the source of the other pupil's power, but also the source of the other pupil. However, if the other pupil was gone, the roots would also degenerate and disappear. Nietian had to help reconstruct Rui Qianyu's 9-color pupils before the roots disappeared. The way to reconstruct the 9-color pupils was to fuse the roots with worldly saint runes. As long as the roots of the 9-color pupils were fused with the worldly saint runes, not only could the pupils be reconstructed, but they could also evolve into saintly rune 9-color pupils. Chapter 3063. Remember forever, 1 month at most. Fat Cat looked at Nietian and said solemnly, "Pupil roots degenerated and disappeared very quickly, and the stronger the other pupil, the faster the pupil roots would disappear. After the 9-color pupils lost both pupils, the pupil roots could only exist for a month at most." 1 month. Nietian pondered and could not help but smile bitterly. "It seems that I have no way out. I must find the array, I devour, and unseal the heaven and earth saint runes." "Yes." Fat Cat looked at Nietian and nodded. The only way to reconstruct the 9-color pupils was to merge with the heaven and earth saint runes, and unsealing the heaven and earth saint runes required a huge amount of energy. The super array in front of him was enough to unseal the heaven and earth saint runes. If he left this place, it would be difficult for Nietian to find the energy to unseal the heaven and earth saint runes. Nietian had no other choice but to find the array, I devour, and let the sacred vitality blood jade absorb the energy of the entire array. Rui Qianyu's life was not in danger for the time being, so Nietian put her into the 9 extremities. "There's no time to lose. I'll go find the array, I devour now." Then Nietian's eyes darkened. He took out the 4 god soul stones and prepared to find the array, I devour, immediately. "Wait." But at this moment, Fat Cat's face darkened and said, "Even if you find the array, I devour now, you'll die." "Then what should I do?" Nietian's face darkened and he was stunned. He had seen the power of the array, I devour, with his own eyes. It was definitely comparable to a human saint stage powerhouse. Not to mention Nietian. Even EMO, who had absolute suppression over the Doomsday Devourer, could not fight the array I devour head-on. If you want to fight against the Doomsday Devourer, the first thing you need to do now is to find a way to increase your strength. Fat Cat's eyes darkened. "Increase my strength?" Nietian was stunned and his face stiffened. He only had less than a month. How could he improve his strength? The devourer of the formation, I was comparable to a sage. Could it be that Nietian could advance to the sage realm within a month? You know better than me how terrifying the formation core devourer is. Fat Cat looked at Nietian and said in a deep voice, "If you want to defeat the devourer of the formation eye, you still have to rely on that winged race kid." "EMO." Nietian was stunned again and said, "EMO is seriously injured now. How can he fight with the devourer of the formation eye?" He knew very well that even if EMO was at his peak, he would not be able to fight against the devourer. "Call that kid out. I have something to say to him." The Fat Cat frowned and said suddenly, "All right." Nietian agreed. Although he didn't know what Fat Cat wanted to do, he still called EMO out. "Nietian." EMO came out of the 9 superbs. His face was still very pale, and he greeted Nietian. "Winged race kid, how's your cultivation of the cold, evil blood scroll going?" At this moment, the Fat Cat looked at EMO and asked with a strange smile. "Huh?" EMO was stunned and said, "You know that I'm cultivating the cold, evil blood scroll." He didn't expect that the Fat Cat would be able to tell that he was cultivating the cold, evil blood scroll. The cold, evil blood scroll was the holy book of the wings of the cold evil. EMO had gone through a lot of trouble and almost lost his life before he finally opened the cold, evil blood scroll. Since the cold, evil blood scroll had been opened, he naturally had to cultivate it. During this period of time, when the Heaven's Choice was at its end, he had been secretly cultivating the cold, evil blood scroll and had made some progress. He could faintly feel that the 3rd pair of cold, evil demon wings would grow soon. But now he was faced with a very awkward situation. There was no cold power for him to absorb. "Kid, the things I know are much more than you can imagine." The Fat Cat laughed and said, "Actually, you have no idea how terrifying the cold, evil blood scroll is. You don't know much about the cold, evil blood scroll now. When you advance to the Saint Plane in the future, you will know how powerful the cold, evil blood scroll is. EMO frowned. He didn't know what the fat cat was going to say and could only listen carefully. He already knew a little about the terror of the cold, evil blood scroll. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to seal a strong cultivator like the world-burying Azura in it. However, the fat cat seemed to be saying that the cold, evil blood scroll was more terrifying than he had imagined. Winged race kid, the wings of the cold evil was chased out of the holy world and even removed from the sacred angel tribe. You should know a little about this, right? The fat cat smiled and continued. I know. EMO frowned and looked at the fat cat confusedly. He knew that these things were passed down from his ancestors. However, how did the fat cat know about these things? This cat, whose size was even more exaggerated than a pig, seemed to know a lot of things. Since you know, then you really want to go back to the holy world, right? The fat cat laughed and asked. Of course. Emo's eyes sank and said, I want to know what our wings of the cold evil did wrong to be expelled from the holy world. Even the sacred angel tribe has to recognize our identity. Very well. The fat cat saw that EMO was a little excited. He raised his eyebrows and said, If I'm not wrong, your third pair of cold evil demon wings will grow out soon. I will make a deal with you. I will help you condense the third pair of cold evil demon wings, and you will help Niet Tion kill the devourer of the Formation Eye. How about it? When EMO heard the fat cat's words, he could not help but frown and said, Lord Chinchilla, if I have the strength, whether you help me or not, as long as Niet Tion needs me, I can kill the devourer of the Formation Eye. But I have seen the devourer of the Formation Eye. It is definitely not something I can fight against now. The corner of the fat cat's mouth twitched and said, EMO, I want to remind you that without Niet Tion, there would be no you now. It is not an exaggeration to say that what you have today is given to you by Niet Tion. Niet Tion could not help but frown and looked at the fat cat in confusion. He did not understand why the latter said this. He saved EMO only because of his heart's desire. He never thought that the latter would repay him. It seemed a little too much for the fat cat to say it so bluntly. I know, and I have never forgotten. EMO frowned and could not help but look at Niet Tion and said solemnly, Niet Tion, you are my most important friend and always will be. No matter what happens in the future, this will not change. EMO, you're also my friend. Niet Tion nodded solemnly, but he felt very strange in his heart. The fat cat's words made the atmosphere very strange. First, it talked about some things about the Wing Clan, and then it emphasized that Niet Tion had saved EMO. The fat cat's words were indeed a little strange. Niet Tion did not know what the fat cat was going to do, and he could not help but feel a little uneasy. He did save EMO several times, but he never thought that the latter would repay him, let alone force the latter to do anything. EMO, I hope that you will always remember every word you said today. The fat cat looked at EMO, and his eyes flickered as he said in a deep voice, EMO nodded. He would definitely remember what he said. Fat, what do you want to say? At this time, Niet Tion could not help but frown and ask, Let's go inside the 9 superbs to talk. The fat cat smiled and did not answer directly, but said with a strange look in his eyes. Chapter 3064. Rank 9 Demigod Saint. Niet Tion and EMO looked at each other, not knowing what fat cat was trying to tell them. The two nodded at each other and entered the 9 extremities. Come on. Little fat cat smiled faintly at the sight of Niet Tion and EMO. With a flash, it led the way. Moments later, Niet Tion and the others arrived outside a valley. Profound ice dragon pillars. Niet Tion's eyes narrowed as he looked at the valley in front of him. The valley in front of him was where he had placed the 12 profound ice dragon pillars. He had no idea why Fat Cat had brought them here. As the 2 men and 1 cat entered the valley, a piercing cold air hit them in the face. In the middle of the valley stood an enormous profound ice altar. The 12 profound ice dragon pillars that were hundreds of thousands of meters tall were like giants that could support the heavens and the earth. EMO, don't you find the aura here familiar? Fat Cat looked at EMO and asked with a playful smile. EMO nodded and said, The profound ice giants have a close relationship with the baleful ice wings. As far as I know, the Frostfiend Wings clan's Frostfiend altar was built with the help of the profound ice giant clan. Tion couldn't help but frown at Emo's words, his face full of surprise. So the profound ice giants had such a close relationship with the baleful ice wings. No wonder the guardian of the baleful ice altar was the soul of a profound ice giant. Emo carefully sensed the runes on the profound ice dragon pillars. Fat Cat smiled faintly and said with a tremble in her eyes. Emo's eyes darkened, and he sent his consciousness over. The bottom of the profound ice dragon pillars was covered with dense runes that were intricate and mysterious, releasing an unusually surging aura. A moment later, Emo's expression changed to one of shock, and he exclaimed, "These runes are actually formed by the baleful cold chi." When he was in the Nine Extremities, he had also come to this valley and found it strange. But he didn't realize that the runes on the profound ice dragon pillars were actually formed by the cold air. It looked like the relationship between the profound ice giants and the demonic frost-winged race was indeed extraordinary. The profound ice giant had helped build the baleful cold wings altar, and the profound ice giant's altar had also been built by the baleful cold wings. Emo, this sovereign will activate these cold, fiendish runes for you to absorb. The Fat Cat's lips twitched as she said, "If you absorb the frost runes, not only will you be able to form the third pair of frost wings, your strength will also improve to the pseudo-sacred realm." Ikemo nodded heavily, his eyes blazing. He had already sensed the terror of the cold fiend runes, so he naturally believed Fat Cat's words. Tion suddenly thought of something and asked with a frown, "Little Fatty, you once said that these runes are used to seal the dragons in the dragon pillars. If the runes are absorbed, won't those dragons come back to life?" "Yes." The Fat Cat nodded and said with a smile, "These dragons have been sealed for countless years. Even if the runes disappear, it will take at least hundreds or even thousands of years for them to be resurrected. How much will your strength improve after such a long time? Will you still be afraid of these dragons?" "Oh, that's good." Tion took a deep breath, and his expression became much more relaxed. These dragons were hundreds of thousands of meters long. Even the most powerful golden dragon was just like a long worm in front of them. It was hard to imagine how powerful these dragons were. However, these dragons would need at least hundreds of years to be resurrected, so Tion was much more at ease. After hundreds of years, his strength would have already reached the sacred realm. Of course, he would not be afraid of these dragons. At this moment, Fat Cat looked at Emo and asked, "Emo, if your strength reaches the pseudo-sacred realm, how confident are you in fighting against the formation I devour?" 50%. Emo thought for a while and nodded. "That's enough." The Fat Cat smiled faintly and said, "Let's begin." "Okay." Emo nodded excitedly. He could not wait to absorb the cold runes on the profound ice dragon pillar. "Fat, how long will it take for Emo to absorb these runes?" Tion was a little worried and could not help but ask. If it took a long time for Emo to absorb the cold runes, it would obviously not work. "About 20 days. The Fat Cat nodded and smiled. Of course, he had to calculate the time accurately. "Okay." Tion nodded slightly. 20 days was acceptable. "Tion, your strength must also improve. You have to absorb the power of the profound yellow seed in advance." The Fat Cat looked at Tion and said solemnly, "Okay." Tion nodded slightly. The next battle against the formation I devour was destined to be a fierce battle. Therefore, he must improve his strength. Previously at the Heaven's Choice platform, most of the power of the profound yellow seed was absorbed by Lulu. Although Lulu had not yet completely refined the power of the profound yellow seed, Tion had to absorb it immediately. However, in this way, a lot of the power of the profound yellow seed would be lost, and Tion might not be able to improve his strength to the pseudo-saint realm. Next, Tion and the others did not waste time. Emo began to absorb the cold runes with the help of the Fat Cat, while Tion began to absorb the power of the profound yellow seed. Tion said goodbye to Cher and then returned to the 9 extremities. He sat cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation, beginning to absorb the power of the profound yellow seed. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Nietian stood up in the 9 extremities. His whole body's aura was more than several times stronger than before. His eyes were extremely sharp, like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed. However, there was not much of a smile on his face. Instead, there was some disappointment. In half a month, he had absorbed the power of the profound yellow seed, and his strength had successfully risen from stage 5 demi-saint to stage 9 demi-saint. Even so, such an ascension did not satisfy him. If he could have waited for a while and allowed Lulu to completely refine the profound yellow seed, his ability would have risen to the threshold of pseudo-saint with the power of the profound yellow seed. Although he was now a stage 9 demi-saint and was just one step away from pseudo-saint, the gap of that one step was like the difference between heaven and earth. At the moment, although Nietian's ability had risen by 4 tiers, his combat ability did not take a qualitative leap. After all, he was still a demi-saint. That was when he arrived at the Black Ice Valley. The profound ice valley had now become a world of ice and snow. In the air, a frost fey cocoon floated, while icicles danced in the air. Everything is going well. He would be able to break out of the cocoon in a few days. Fat Cat said with a faint smile when she saw Nietian arrive. Yeah. Nietian nodded slightly, but his expression was not good. He was very doubtful that even if EMO could condense a third pair of Frostfey wings and ascend to the threshold of Pseudo-Saint, would he really be a match for the Devourer of the Formation Eye? Still, there was no use thinking about such things now. Everything would have to wait until EMO woke up. After that, Nietian checked on the Rakshasa Sanus and left the 9 extremities after making sure that she was fine. It would be a few days before EMO woke up, and he could use that time to look for Feng Qi and Si Xiaoya. In the end, both Feng Qi and Si Xiaoya were not that powerful, and Nietian was still a little worried. When Nietian stepped out of the 9 extremities, the sight that greeted his eyes was something he did not expect. Chapter 3065. The Abyss, huh? Nietian had just come out of the 9 Superbs when he saw that the entire valley was occupied by the Doomsday Devourers. Beside him, Cher was fighting against the Doomsday Devourers. Shui, what's going on? Nietian frowned as he looked at Shui. Let's get out of here first. Shui slashed out with her sword. Everywhere her sword passed, blood splattered everywhere as several Doomsday Devourers were directly killed. Half a month later, she had completely absorbed the power of the runes. Not only did the runes not harm her martial body, but they had also elevated her strength to a rank 3 pseudo-saint. Most of the Doomsday Devourers in the valley were mortal-class Devourers. They were no match for Cher. All right, Nietian replied. His body shook as sword will surged out of his body. A violent sword aura soared into the sky as he slashed down with his sword. Sword shadows surged out and repelled dozens of Doomsday Devourers. Nietian's combat ability had improved greatly after advancing to a rank 9 demi-saint, but he still could not compare to Cher. The two fought as they retreated and soon escaped from the army of Doomsday Devourers. A moment later, Nietian and Cher arrived at a spacious area. Cher, what happened just now? Nietian asked again, puzzled. Why would the Doomsday Devourers appear in that valley, and in groups at that? I don't know either. Shui shook her head and said with a puzzled expression, This place gives me an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It seems that wherever I appear, the Doomsday Devourers will automatically be attracted. Nietian frowned. He did not look good. He did not expect that something so strange had happened to Cher, and she did not tell him. Perhaps something had happened to Rui Qianyu, and Cher did not want Nietian to worry. Nietian was getting more and more curious about Cher's true identity. This included the Heaven's Chosen One, who looked exactly like Cher and claimed to be Cher's older sister. This made Cher's identity even more mysterious. Cher said that she had an inexplicable sense of familiarity with this place. Had she really been here before? Cher, apart from these, is there anything else strange? Nietian frowned and asked after thinking for a moment. Cher looked at Nietian and seemed to hesitate for a moment. But in the end, she still said, "Ever since I came here, a figure has always appeared in my mind." A figure. Tian was stunned for a moment, and couldn't help but feel even more puzzled. "Yes," Cher nodded and said. "To be exact, it was a face, a very blurry face." This. Tian was stunned and couldn't speak for a long time. He really didn't know what was going on with Cher. "Tian, I feel that person seems to be guiding me to a place." Then, Cher's beautiful eyes trembled slightly, and her expression was a little nervous. "Where?" Tian was stunned again, and the doubt on his face grew even stronger. It seemed that this place had an inexplicable relationship with Cher. "I'm not sure either. I can only rely on my feelings to find it." Cher frowned, and her expression was puzzled and nervous. Actually, what she wanted to say was that she must go to this place. If she wasn't looking for Tian, she would have gone there long ago. "I'll go with you." Tian could see Cher's confusion, and he said in a deep voice. Vaguely, he felt that this world in front of him was very important to Cher. Although Cher didn't say it explicitly, he could see from Cher's eyes that Cher really wanted to go to that place. He still had some time to spare, so he could accompany Snow. Cher thought for a moment and nodded gently. Then, based on her feelings, Cher began to look for that mysterious place. At this time, Cher felt a strong sense of uneasiness. The closer she got to that mysterious place, the stronger the uneasiness in her heart. And at this time, Tian found a strange thing. They were now approaching the devourer of the Formation Eye. Could it be that the place Cher was going to was the place where the devourer of the Formation Eye was? "Cher, I think I know where you're going." Tian frowned and suddenly spoke. Then, he handed the 4 God Soul Stones to Cher, and his divine sense locked on the position of the devourer of the Formation Eye. He transmitted his divine sense to Cher and said, "This is the place you're going." Cher took the 4 God Soul Stones and was stunned for a few seconds. Then, she said, "It's here." Sure enough, Tian's eyes trembled, and he was pleasantly surprised. The place Cher was looking for was really the place where the devourer of the Formation Eye was. Then, what was the relationship between the location of the devourer of the Formation Eye and the mysterious face that appeared in Cher's mind? Next, Tian identified the place Cher was looking for, and the two sped up a lot. A day later, Tian and Shui arrived at the edge of a bottomless abyss. "This is the place." Cher looked at the abyss in front of her, and her beautiful eyes trembled. Her expression was a little complicated, and she seemed to be a little excited and a little frightened. Tian looked at the abyss in front of him, and his face was not good. This abyss was tens of thousands of meters in radius, and it was bottomless, as if it was connected to hell. The abyss was filled with an extremely strong, devouring aura. According to the perception of the 4 God Soul Stones, the devourer of the Formation, I was in the abyss. "Cher, let's wait here first. When EMO comes out, we'll go in together." Tian looked at the abyss in front of him and said solemnly. He knew very well how terrifying the devourer of the Formation Eye was. Even Cher could not fight against it. At this moment, the only person who could fight against the devourer of the Formation Eye was EMO. Cher nodded slightly. She was a little panicked at the moment, as if there was something hidden in the abyss that terrified her. Next, Tian and Cher waited outside the abyss. 3 days later, Fat Cat and EMO finally came out of the 9 extremities. Tian. EMO was very excited to walk out of the 9 extremities, and his aura was extremely sharp, and his aura was several times stronger than before. Rank 1, Pseudo-Saint. Tian saw EMO and sensed the latter's strength, and his eyes trembled as he exclaimed in surprise. In just 20 days, EMO had absorbed the frost runes and successfully completed his transformation, and his strength had risen from rank 6, Demi-Saint, to rank 1, Pseudo-Saint. More importantly, Tian could feel that EMO's frost aura was far more terrifying than before, as if it had undergone a qualitative change. EMO's improvement in strength pleased Tian, and he was even more confident about the upcoming battle. A moment later, Tion and the others calmed down and prepared to enter the abyss. However, it was at this moment that Fat Cat seemed to have noticed something and suddenly exclaimed, "Wait! Fat, what's wrong?" Tion was stunned and looked at Fat Cat. "Tion, this abyss is the core of the entire formation, and the aura of the formation is beyond my expectations." Little Fat Cat furrowed its brows and said with an ugly expression, "This sovereign's previous estimation of the formation might have been wrong." "What do you mean?" Tion's expression darkened as he asked in surprise. Chapter 3066. Half man, half flower this. Tion looked at the little Fat Cat and couldn't help but be stunned. There was something more terrifying than the Array-Eye Devourer in the abyss. The Array-Eye Devourer was already comparable to a Sage Realm warrior. Was there something more powerful in the abyss? Tion, that huge Doomsday Devourer shouldn't be the Array-Eye. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded, and it was trembling. "What do you mean?" Tion was confused. He had not expected this. The gigantic Doomsday Devourer you saw earlier was probably just a fake formation core. "The real formation core is in this abyss," the Ghost Emperor said in a deep voice. "This Emperor feels that we shouldn't enter this abyss." "We shouldn't enter?" Tion screamed when he heard the Ghost Emperor's words. He was already here. How could he not go in? No matter what the Array-Eye was, it was in the abyss. Whether or not the Heaven and Earth Saint Rune could be unsealed depended on whether or not the Array-Eye could be destroyed. And whether or not the Heaven and Earth Saint Rune could be unsealed depended on whether or not Rui Qinyu's rainbow pupils could be reconstructed. Also, the abyss in front of them had a mysterious connection with Cher. It was obviously impossible for Tion to stop at this time. "Think it through, Tion," the little Fat Cat said, its voice trembling. "Even I don't know what's in the abyss. Perhaps we'll run into something we can't even imagine." He knew that Tion would not give up, but he had to say it. "I've thought it through." Tion became cold, and his eyes were much more resolute. For Rui Qinyu, for Cher, he did not care how big the risk was. "Emo, you shouldn't go in. Just wait for us outside the abyss," Tion said to Emo after some thought. Although Emo was the one who could fight against the huge devourer, the situation was beyond Tion's expectations. He did not want Emo to take the risk. "Tion, we are friends." Emo frowned and said in a deep voice. He did not say much, but his resolute eyes had already expressed his intentions. "Thanks." Tion looked at Emo and nodded. This time, he owed Emo a favor. Next, Tion and the others did not hesitate and jumped into the abyss. The moment he entered the abyss, Tion immediately felt a strong, devouring aura attack him. It was like a maggot in his bones, sticking close to him, as if it wanted to infiltrate his body. He activated his Yuan meridians to resist the devouring aura. The abyss was very deep. Tion felt that he had sunk into the abyss. After some time, the three of them landed. Tion, Saint Emo, Saint Dragon, Emo 2, and Dragon. It was as if they had arrived at a huge underground palace, with huge stone pillars standing erect. Tion had assumed that this place would be a bottomless abyss. Never had he expected that there would be an underground palace. "What is this place?" Emo also discovered that something was wrong and exclaimed, "Pooh! Puff! Puffed!" As soon as he finished speaking, countless fireballs appeared in the surrounding space and floated in midair. Tion was startled by this sudden scene and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. At this moment, under the illumination of the countless fireballs, the entire palace was revealed. Although the huge palace was built underground, it was very spectacular. It was even larger than the most luxurious palace in the Myriad domain. It was hard to imagine what kind of person could build such a huge palace hundreds of thousands of meters underground. Emo was also extremely shocked, and his expression was lifeless. Cher didn't look shocked at all. Instead, she looked puzzled. "Ha ha ha ha!" At this moment, a deep and forceful laughter suddenly rang out in the palace. It resounded through the spacious hall and seemed extremely eerie. Yet Tion frowned and immediately became nervous. Who would have thought that there would be someone in this hall? At this moment, Cher frowned and her pretty face suddenly darkened. She couldn't help but exclaim, "It's that person! That person?" Tion froze for a moment before realizing that the person Cher was talking about was the mysterious face that had appeared in her mind. "Master of the heavenly sacred heart, you've finally appeared." The deep voice rang out again in the spacious hall. "You are." Cher's expression suddenly changed. She seemed to have thought of something, but she couldn't tell the other person's identity. "What? It's been so many years. Have you forgotten your old friend?" The deep voice rang out again with a hint of mockery, but more anger. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been imprisoned underground for millions of years." The violent voice rang out in Cher's ears, but she couldn't remember the other person's name. Millions of years? Tion frowned when he heard this voice. His expression froze. Could it be that Cher had already existed for millions of years? What exactly was Cher's identity? "Master of the heavenly sacred heart, you didn't expect this, did you? Many years later, we'll meet again in the same old place." Then the deep voice rang out again, reverberating in the air, filled with deep resentment. Boom! In the next moment, the void suddenly trembled, and an extremely strange figure appeared in midair. Tion suddenly looked up and frowned when he saw the figure in front of him. This figure was too strange. Floating in the air, it looked like a blood-red flower from afar. But upon closer inspection, there was a human face in the center of the flower. It was as if this was a monster that had fused a person and a flower. Doomsday Lotus. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out in surprise. Tion's eyebrows furrowed. "This person is amazing. He actually fused his martial body and divine soul into a Doomsday Lotus." At the same time, the Ghost Emperor's voice rang out, filled with shock and panic. The half-human, half-flower monster in front of him was the fusion of a martial artist and a Doomsday Lotus. "No wonder you don't remember me. So the heavenly sacred heart has been sealed." At this moment, the half-human, half-flower monster spoke. Its eyes were fixed on Cher, and it said in a deep voice, "A sealed heavenly sacred heart isn't fun. Why don't I help you unseal it?" Boom! With that, the half-human, half-flower monster suddenly moved. A wave of devouring energy appeared and directly shrouded Cher. "Ah!" Before Cher could react, she screamed. Her body was wrapped up by a wave of energy, and she floated in the air with a pained expression. "Tion, stop him!" At this moment, Fat Cat screamed and shouted. The power of the heavenly sacred heart was too strong. If it was unsealed now, Cher would definitely not be able to withstand it. She would be killed instantly. "Monster, let her go!" Tion instantly reacted and let out a low roar. However, to his horror, he discovered that his 9 origin meridians were being firmly suppressed by a strange force. The demon eye of the demon fetus and the extreme demon annihilation seal have both appeared. Not bad. The half-human, half-flower monster looked at Tion and sneered. "Then let me see how strong your extreme demon annihilation seal is." As soon as it finished speaking, Tion suddenly felt a terrifying power enveloping him and instantly surged into his demon eye. In the next moment, a glaring wound appeared on his face. It was the extreme demon annihilation seal. Chapter 3067. Godly Demon Body. The extreme demon annihilation seal appeared once again, and the blood-red mark spread across Tion's face like flames. In an instant, half of his face was covered by the extreme demon annihilation seal. The streaks of blood were blinding and emanated a cold and bizarre demonic aura. "Oh no!" Fat Cat sensed that something was amiss and cried out in shock. The last time Tion used the extreme demon annihilation seal, the backlash had almost killed him. If he had not absorbed the sacred world seed and awakened the second star Scardark seal, he would not have been able to resist the backlash at all. This time, the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal that the half-man, half-flower monster had unleashed was clearly stronger than before. There was no doubt that the backlash of the extreme demon annihilation seal this time would be even stronger, even if Nietion's current ability was already a stage 9 demi-saint. There was no way he could resist the backlash of the extreme demon annihilation seal. It was then that the extreme demon annihilation seal on Nietion's face spread, and a terrifying power burst out. His demonic I felt like it was about to explode, and the pain that seeped into his bones made him scream in agony. Immediately after that, the terrifying eye power was not unleashed, but surged into his limbs and meridians like a ferocious beast. In the blink of an eye, Nietion felt that every drop of his blood, every inch of his bones, and every meridian in his body were filled with violent eye intent. The terrifying impact force was like a flood that had broken a dam and was going to rip his body apart. Bam, bam, bam. In the next moment, amidst the heart-wrenching pain, Nietion felt that his entire body was being torn apart, as if it was about to explode. His consciousness had fallen into endless darkness at that moment, as if he was in a dark vortex, and the more he struggled, the deeper he sank. Martial body torn, spiritual soul destroyed. Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor exclaimed at the same time as they sensed that something was wrong. The power of the extreme demon annihilation seal burst out, and the backlash devoured Nietion, tearing his martial body apart and his spiritual soul apart. The power contained in the demonic annihilation seal was enough to kill a saint, and since Nietion was only a stage 9 demi-saint, there was no way he could withstand the impact of such power. In just an instant, his martial body and divine soul would completely dissipate. Nietion, at the side, Emo reacted and roared. His silhouette flickered as 3 pairs of ice wings appeared on his back. Instantly, 3 waves of extremely cold, baleful chi whistled out towards the half-human, half-flower monster. The monster looked at Emo and cried out in surprise. A mocking smile appeared on its face, and a strange power appeared. The air trembled, and the 3 streams of baleful ice chi strangely disappeared. The monster's power was strange and powerful. It was as if he was the supreme existence in this space, ruling over everything. No power could threaten him. Cold Demon Wings race, abandoned child of the divine angel race. Moreover, you even grew 3 pairs of cold demon wings. Interesting. The monster looked at Emo and smiled. Looks like I, Doomsday Nether, am quite lucky. Doomsday Nether was the name of the half-human, half-flower monster. He did not expect that the 3 martial artists that appeared in Doomsday Nether Temple today were not simple. One was the owner of the heavenly lost Sacred Heart. One was a divine demon nascent embryo, and one was from the Cold Demon Wings race. The power of the heavenly lost Sacred Heart was needless to say. The divine demon nascent embryo was even more terrifying. Even in the sacred world, it was considered a forbidden bloodline. As for the Cold Demon Wings race, they had once caused a huge storm in the angel sacred world. The entire angel sacred world was almost destroyed by them. Doomsday Nether could not help but find it interesting that the 3 of them were gathered together and appeared at the same time. Let me see how strong the abandoned child that was chased out of the sacred world by the divine angel race is. Doomsday Nether sneered. Then, a strange power was released and wrapped around Emo like an invisible giant hand. In an instant, sharp pain spread throughout his body. Emo felt that the cold demon chi in his body was no longer under his control. Instead, it seemed to have turned into icicles and crazily cut his body. On the other side, the extreme demon annihilation mark on Nietion's face had spread to his whole body. His body was covered in glaring wounds like a spider web. At this time, his martial body was being torn apart at an unbelievable speed. His whole body was already dripping with blood. His divine soul had fallen into an endless abyss, as if it would be submerged in the next moment. Nietion, stabilize your divine soul. At the moment of life and death, the Ghost Emperor and Fat Cat's voices sounded at the same time, shouting loudly. Nietion's divine soul was blurred in the endless darkness. He could only hear the empty shouts resounding in his ears. Lulu, do it. At this time, Fat Cat suddenly shouted, as if he wanted Lulu to do something. At this time, he was already on the edge of life and death. Fat Cat decided to go all out, hoping that he could use his godly body to resist the backlash of the extreme demon annihilation mark. Lulu agreed. He had long been prepared and had been waiting for Fat Cat's orders. At this time, Nietion's only chance was to awaken his godly body. Previously, when Nietion was in a state of rage, he had temporarily awakened his godly body. However, that was only for a very short period of time, and it was in a passive situation. At this moment, Fat Cat took the risk and prepared to let Nietion awaken his godly body again. Previously, when Nietion's godly body awakened, it was because his eye force had fused with his bloodline, triggering a temporary awakening of his godly body. At this time, when Nietion's extreme demon annihilation mark went berserk, the backlash was actually an opportunity to attack his martial body. The extreme demon annihilation mark was born from the demon eye, and its essence was also eye force. As long as Nietion could fuse the extreme demon annihilation mark into his bloodline, his godly body would definitely awaken. But now, Nietion's divine sense was in a state of collapse, and he couldn't control the extreme demon annihilation mark at all. The key now was Liolio's turn. Buzz! In the next moment, the Saint's Soul blood mark on Nietion's forehead became active, and a white halo appeared, instantly enveloping his body. Doomsday Ming's eyes narrowed when he saw this scene, and he exclaimed in surprise. He didn't expect that Nietion would have the Saint's Soul blood mark of the Saint's Soul Ghost Valley clan. It's just the Saint's Soul blood mark. Don't tell me you want to contend against this king's doomsday taboo. Doomsday Ming sneered, his eyes filled with disdain. The Saint's Soul blood mark was very strong, but it was clearly impossible to contend against his doomsday taboo. But in the next moment, Doomsday Ming's smile suddenly froze. He immediately realized that something was wrong, and his eyes trembled, revealing a trace of panic, and his lips trembled as he said, "Godly body." At this moment, he finally understood that the Saint's Soul blood mark was not the key, but that Nietion was about to awaken the godly body. He never thought that Nietion could awaken the godly body with only the strength of a stage 9 demi-saint. Brat, you want to awaken the godly body? Impossible. Then Doomsday Ming calmed down, and his half-human, half-flower body trembled for a moment. Then the Doomsday Lotus bloomed, and a terrifying Doomsday taboo surged out, enveloping Nietion. Chapter 3068. Doomsday Forbidden Power in Midair. The terrifying forbidden power of Doomsday surged forward, instantly enveloping Nietion's body. Following this, streams of forbidden power surged into Nietion's body, activating the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal. Lulu, Fat Cat sensed the danger and screamed. Lulu did not speak. He was fully focused on helping Nietion merge with the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal. However, under the stimulation of the forbidden power of Doomsday, the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal became abnormally violent and uncontrollable. Even with Liolio's full strength, he still could not control the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal. In the blink of an eye, Nietion fell into a life and death situation. Nietion, on the other side, the heavenly Sacred Heart seal in Cher's body was being unsealed. She struggled to look at Nietion and used all her strength to finally call out Nietion's name. Her voice was so weak that it was almost inaudible. However, when it entered Nietion's ears, it sounded like a clap of thunder. At this moment, Nietion actually made a move. He slowly turned his head, and his dull eyes saw an exquisite and extremely familiar face. However, that face was filled with despair. Tears welled up in his eyes and finally flowed down his cheeks. In the abyss of his divine sense, Nietion could vaguely see a face that slowly became clearer, causing his heart to feel like it was being torn apart by a knife. Cher! In the next moment, the sudden tearing pain caused Nietion's lips to tremble as he called out a name. Following this, his divine sense that was on the verge of collapsing suddenly became clear. His cloudy eyes instantly turned bright like stars. The person he loved the most was currently suffering. How could he allow himself to sink into the abyss like this? Nietion, Ghost Emperor and Fat Cat simultaneously exclaimed when they sensed Nietion's divine sense suddenly recovering. Doomsday Ming also sensed this and couldn't help but exclaim. He did not expect that Nietion's divine sense could actually recover under the double pressure of the forbidden power of Doomsday and the extreme demon annihilation seal. Nietion's divine sense definitely could not be this strong. Doomsday neither could tell that it was Shui-Er's power that had awakened Nietion's divine awareness from the abyss of divine awareness. Indeed, Nietion's divine sense wasn't as strong as it had been before. It was only because Shui-Er had activated the power of the princess's tear that her divine sense had resonated with the residual aura of the princess's tear in Nietion's body, that his divine sense had instantly recovered. Nietion, control the power in your body and fuse it into your bloodline. Little Fat Cat shouted loudly at this moment. Since Nietion's divine sense had recovered, then there was no need for Lulu to control the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal. Nietion could control it himself. And Nietion nodded heavily. Then with a thought, the Yuan meridians in his body began to slowly revolve. Boy, you want to awaken the godly demon body? Absolutely impossible. Doomsday Ming roared. Then an even more violent forbidden power of Doomsday gushed out, directly into Nietion's body. Of course, he knew that Nietion wanted to merge the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal into his blood and awaken the godly demon body. My body, I will control it. Nietion endured the pain of his body being torn apart. Cold roared. His body erupted with terrifying star power, forcing out the forbidden power of Doomsday. The forbidden power of Doomsday could suppress his 9 Yuan meridians, but it could not suppress the Star Essence Stone. The sudden scene caused Doomsday Nether to cry out in surprise. His eyes were wide open, clearly extremely shocked. He never dreamed that Nietion still had the Star Essence Stone in his body. Before, he had been too excited about Nietion's godly demon embryo that he did not even notice the presence of star power. Now, he finally understood why Nietion could awaken the demonic despite only having the strength of a demi-saint and even the extreme demon annihilation seal. The reason why Nietion could be so terrifying was closely related to the Star Essence Stone in his body. If not for the Star Essence Stone, Nietion would not have been able to withstand the pressure of the extreme demon annihilation seal alone. If he had known that Nietion had the Star Essence Stone in his body, Doomsday Ming would not have been so careless. But now it was all too late, and he could no longer stop Nietion from awakening the godly demon body. In the very next moment, Doomsday Ming's eyes trembled, and he shouted, "Kid, your martial body would not be able to withstand it if you awaken the godly demon body with your current strength." He was right. Nietion's martial body definitely could not withstand the godly demon body. The stronger the awakening of the godly demon body, the stronger the godly demon body would be. Before this, Nietion had only used his normal eye power and did not use the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal. But now, he wanted to fuse the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal to awaken the godly demon body. The extreme demon annihilation seal was a power that could slay saints. That was why his godly demon body would be unimaginably terrifying once it awakened. So this martial body is called the godly demon body. Nietion looked at Doomsday Ming and laughed coldly. With a single thought, the bloodline throughout his body began to fuse with the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal. At this moment, he had no other choice but to awaken the godly demon body. It was his only chance against Doomsday Ming. Boom, boom, boom. Then, as the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal fused with his bloodline, Nietion's aura continued to grow stronger, and his martial body erupted with astonishing power. Under the influence of the martial body's power, the air around his body appeared to be in a dense state. Madman! Doomsday Ming saw this scene, and his eyes trembled violently as he let out a low roar in exasperation. Nietion's awakening of the godly demon body clearly meant that he wanted to perish together with him. At this moment, as the godly demon body awakened, black runes appeared on Nietion's body. His aura was incomparably dark, making him look extremely evil. At this moment, Nietion felt that the power of his martial body was constantly breaking through the limit. The power of his body seemed to be on the verge of exploding. Emo saw this scene from the side and was shocked speechless. Even though he was wrapped in the Doomsday Forbidden power, he could still feel the astonishing power of Nietion's body. Previously, he had seen Nietion's state after awakening the godly demon body. But this time, Nietion's martial body was far from comparable to the previous time. Damn it! Doomsday Ming could no longer stop Nietion. He let out a low roar and released a Doomsday Forbidden power that spread in all directions. Roar! 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 A moment later, a series of low roars sounded out, and the entire Doomsday Palace began to shake. A terrifying, devouring aura surged over from all directions. Doomsday devours. At this moment, Nietion's godly demon body had already awakened. Feeling the devouring aura coming from all directions, the corner of his mouth twitched and a cold smile appeared on his face. In his view, Doomsday Ming summoning the Doomsday Devourers at this moment was a sign of cowardice. Immediately, the Doomsday Devourers appeared in all directions and swarmed over like a tidal wave. Nietion looked around and couldn't help but frown. He saw no less than 9 Doomsday Devourers, each of them over 100 meters in size. These Doomsday Devourers were previously thought by Nietion to be the devourer of the Formation Core.